A town square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is 97.3 ESPN, home of the Philadelphia Eagles.
He is hit! He stumbles! He's down!
WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City.
Josh Hennick here, filling in for Mike Gill for DVD here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Well, it's certainly been an interesting week. By the way, Mike Gill was planning to be here, but reports are coming from the LPGA Pro-Am that there are some reasons why that their golf group has a slow pace of play, and the rumor is that it is not Mike Gill's fault. Mike Gill was planning to be here, but he will be here as soon as he is done with the round of golf at the Pro-Am. So you got me for probably at least the next 30 minutes here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, you can join the conversation. Text board 609-403-0973 is the text board. DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. And, of course, we are live, as always, on YouTube and Twitter at 973 ESPN. Again, Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill. Mike will get here as soon as he can, as he is currently on the golf course still at the LPGA Pro-Am. You know, it's been an interesting week in Philadelphia sports. I mean, obviously sports in general, but in Philadelphia sports is definitely interesting because the Eagles have an embarrassing loss on Monday Night Football. The Phillies are pathetic because they couldn't win a simple game last night. I mean, Charlie Morton only pitched 7 innings. What was your excuse? You scored 1 run after that? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And of course, the cloud of Ben Simmons is hanging over the 76ers in the same way the Watcher looms in the distance on the Disney Plus What If show. And then today, we have Nick Sirianni. Fresh white shirt. I mean, this dude has probably the most diverse wardrobe I've ever seen a coach have. I mean, he's a young guy. He's allowed to have a diverse wardrobe. I'm not mad at him about it, but I'm just saying, man, if Doug Peterson took the approach that Nick Sirianni had to his wardrobe, I think we might have perceived Doug Peterson a little differently. But Nick Sirianni said a lot of nothing and a lot of something at the same time. So we'll get to Nick Sirianni's comments today to the media, because remember, he didn't speak yesterday. Typically, the way it works on a regular week is the Eagles play on Sunday, coach speaks post-game, then the coach speaks the day after. So the Eagles literally just cut out one of Sirianni's pressers. He spoke the usual Wednesday today, and we'll hear from him again, looks like, on Friday. So we get one less day of Sirianni, which might be a good thing. I'll get to that in just a moment. Don't forget, still to come, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City will join us coming up at 2:40 p.m. on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. ESPN radio host Jason Fitz joins the show coming up at 3 p.m. Football at 4, Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, will join the show at 4 p.m. And Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports NFL writer, at 5:25. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill. TBD here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, so I got to touch on this Sirianni stuff because, you know, I wrote the article at 973ESPN.com yesterday about how Sirianni, to me, is one of the most obvious people to blame. And, you know, I got a little pushback from the social media people. You know what I mean? The people who love to type on their keyboards or on their phones, right? And I was thinking about it for the last 24 hours about how, like, you know, people, they either really agree with me or they just hate Jalen Hurts. Okay. That's the tact I'm taking. And I'm not trying to be mean, but I think some people just want to find something wrong with Jalen. Even though people who know much more football than you and me and anybody else who is having these conversations all think Jalen Hurts is better than we do. But I digress. When Nick Sirianni got up to speak to the media today, man, I felt vindicated. I felt validated. I felt just straight up handed on a silver platter why I wrote that article yesterday. I don't think Sirianni gets it. Now, look, I got to give the guy credit. He handles a press conference much better today than he did months ago. So maybe he can learn from his mistakes. Maybe he is an individual who can grow and evolve and be better. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that Sirianni is not an individual who can grow. But when I hear him say stuff like, I got to do better. Well, yeah, you're right. We got to run the ball more. Well, we let Jalen make the decision on the RPO, how he's reading the situation. Basically, every answer was Sirianni basically taking responsibility for something that happened. And that's cute and all. But what you got to do about it? I mentioned this yesterday on 97.3 ESPN on game night, 6 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. The Eagles coaches wore these shirts during training camp. And the pictures on 97.3ESPN.com. The shirt has all of the fundamentals, all the groundwork things that Nick Sirianni believes in. Fundamentals, discipline, accountability, get 1% better every day. And that's all great for a t-shirt and a motivational speaker and an Instagram post and a hashtag on Twitter. But how does that work in application? And after seeing Sirianni's press conference, I don't know how much of what he preaches he's absorbing. Because there's a huge difference in the tone of Sirianni Monday night and this afternoon compared to what I heard from Jalen Hurts. And this is how we'll loop Hurts back in here. Jalen took responsibility in a way that you take him seriously. You listen to Hurts speak. And yeah, he says some weird stuff like, when you go take a dump, basically, you go to the number in the bathroom. You don't watch it flush. You just move on. You flush it and you move on. He says weird stuff like that. And you're like, all right, whatever. But Hurts sounds more sincere about taking responsibility than Sirianni does. Now, maybe part of it is Sirianni's personality. I don't know. The dude has coached 3 games as a head coach in the NFL, and he's had 3 games as a play caller. So maybe it's going to be said for it. But you have 2 individuals who realistically are lacking experience in the NFL. Sirianni's been a head coach for 3 games. Hurts has been a starting quarterback for 7 games. I can't make grandiose presumptions and opinions about them off of those things. But what I can do is tell you that when I hear Sirianni speak, I'm not convinced yet. I need more from Nick. Because actions speak louder than words. And when the Eagle fans go to Lincoln Financial Field this Sunday, they deserve better than the 49ers game. They deserve better than the embarrassment that was the Cowboys' loss. The Eagles fans missed football for most of last year. Many of you were stuck in your houses. You couldn't go out. You couldn't watch football. You couldn't mingle with people. You want to go to the link. You want to root for your team. And all the head coach can do is parrot the same stuff that he's been parroting all along. I don't think that's good enough. I think that the Eagles organization, the fans deserve better than what Sirianni's handing them. And the other thing that he said today should make everybody a little uncomfortable. Because Well, Sirianni, he gave his usual answers. We don't know who's starting at left and right guard yet. We'll figure it out. And, well, I got to do a better job. I got to run the ball more. I got to put Jalen in a better position to be successful, blah, blah, blah. Interestingly enough, one of the reporters, and it was hard for me to tell who it was because of the way the audio was coming through, but one of the reporters asked me, we can check the transcript later when it comes out, asked him about him meeting with Jeffrey Lurie, the owner. Now, for those who don't remember, Doug Peterson and the owner, Mr. Lurie, met every Tuesday and reviewed the game before, the game plan coming up. This is a staple of this organization since Chip Kelly got fired. The owner of the organization is more involved than ever before. And now, according to Sirianni, well, the owners at practice almost every day, and we talk throughout the week. I wrote about this over at 973ESPN.com. You got to blame the owner for the situation we're in. You have to. If you're someone who woke up Tuesday and Wednesday morning and you're still holding to the Jalen Hurts doesn't have it and Jalen Hurts was the reason why they lost the game, if you're that guy, I don't know how I can help you understand football. Because the head coach told you two things today that should open your eyes. Number one, that he's responsible for what Jalen Hurts does. And number two, that he talks with the owner consistently throughout the week. The same owner who always wants to evolve offensively, who wants to be 5 years ahead of 5 years ahead, who fired two of the greatest coaches in the franchise's history. There's only 3 coaches who have led this team to a Super Bowl, and he hired and fired both of them. The same owner who had a manifesto for about 17 minutes before they introduced Sirianni on a Zoom call and left him out to dry for the media to ask him a bunch of questions that he was neither prepared for nor was he willing or able to answer. The owner skirted responsibility. The owner talks about emotional intelligence when he hires coaches like Doug Peterson and Nick Sirianni, but he himself skirts responsibility when there are reports out there that he wanted to fire Frank Reich and that he was the man behind drafting J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. The same owner who insisted on moving on from Doug Peterson and handed the keys to Nick Sirianni, who had just as much experience as Doug Peterson and Andy Reid did when he hired them. Don't mention the fact that Sirianni never hired a coaching staff with many other veterans aside from Jeff Stoughton on the staff. Remember when Sean McVay was 31 years old when the Rams hired him? Remember that? Do you also remember who he hired on his staff? Wade Phillips, who was double his age as defensive coordinator. John Fossil, who had been in the league for a decade, special teams coordinator. Another veteran of the league. He hired Greg Olson as quarterbacks coach, a guy who had been in the league also for over a decade. Sean McVay has been successful in the NFL because he surrounded himself with the right people. Nick Sirianni hired a bunch of guys who are mostly his age. And that might be great for going out and having a beer and hanging out with your buddies and going out on a Friday night because you know you're on similar paths of life. But it might not be practical for football. And considering this connection between Sirianni and Lurie, I'm starting to wonder if the owner is starting to meddle in the football team. Look, you had a successful formula when you won in Atlanta. And now you've gotten away from it for 2 straight weeks. And frankly, I'm tired of hearing about RPOs. I feel like RPO is turned into the coverall scapegoat for NFL coaches. It's a nice excuse for them to not have to explain anything. It's a nice, convenient blanket. And for Sirianni, he gave you a lot of nothing except for two things in that presser. Josh Ennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, you can join the show by direct messaging the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Text can come in 609-403-0973. I see messages from Derek and Jalen watching the show. I'll get to your messages in just a moment. But I want to finish up with this. Jalen Hurts, did he have a great game Monday night? No. You could even argue it might have been the worst game of his career. But he has also started 7 games. And in a world where Tom Brady didn't start as a rookie, Peyton Manning led the league in interceptions as a rookie, Eli Manning was pretty poor as a rookie. You know what all those guys have in common? Super Bowls. Championships. At least 2 of them are going to be in the Hall of Fame. Eli might be as well, depending on who is actually on the voting committee at that point in time. But yet, I see people online that want to blame Jalen Hurts for the game. And I'm hearing the same verbiage, right? He lacks the it factor. He has trouble throwing the ball down the field. And when I hear people parroting the same things, I kind of wonder if everybody's listening to the same person. Because Sirianni just told you today that he has to put Jalen Hurts into a better situation. When they asked him, was Jalen audibling out of run plays, Sirianni didn't say yes. Sirianni said, well, some of those plays are RPOs, and it's on the quarterback to read the situation. Do you really think that Jalen Hurts is doing anything with the head coach telling him to do it? Does anybody really think that Jalen Hurts is going to the line and pulling Aaron Rodgers and saying, Matt LaFleur, Mike McCarthy, I don't care about your call. I'm going to do whatever I want? No. Do you think it's a coincidence that Jalen Hurts is a captain of this team and has only started 7 games? Is it a coincidence that the players respect him and look at him the way they do? But yet there are people out there who want to tell you he lacks the it factor. They want to tell you that Hurts can't throw the ball down the field, which is obviously not true because you must have forgot about the Quez Watkins pass. That was immaculately amazing. Oh, and by the way, if you watch the Manning cast, which I rewatched the game with that touchdown throw you threw to Greg Ward, Peyton and Eli Manning and Chris Long were all in all of that throw. The one pass to Devonta Smith that he dropped, Manning, both of them, ripped Devonta Smith. The interception on the throw to Rager, both Manning said, not a good throw, but also blamed Rager for not stopping the ball from being intercepted, for not trying to come back to the ball to prevent the interception. So I got to ask you guys, who are you going to believe? People who played football at the highest level, their opinions of Jalen Hurts? Or some dude on some other television or radio station who's not on 97.3 ESPN putting vomit out there? Just some for you guys to chew on. Josh Hennig filling for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill will be here a little bit later as he was at the LPGA Pro-Am. Him, Pete Thompson, also Dave Weinberg was there as well. A lot of people over there having a good day out there as they get ready for the LPGA tournament over here in South Jersey. Get some of your messages here before we hit the break here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan is now open on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot. Visit them online at mattblattnissan.com. Of course, there's a plethora of ways you can get a hold of the show, whether you're listening on the radio in your car, you're listening through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City on your phone. You're watching us online. We appreciate wherever you're consuming the show today. A couple of your messages coming in I want to get to. Jalen chimes in and says, Sirianni preaches accountability, but I'm not getting that from him. Said they need to run the ball more, but then he says he counts almost every RPO as a run. Yeah, when he said that, Jalen, that was a weird thing for him to say. I feel like that was his way of trying to like excuse the play calling, to try to be like, well, we call run plays, but we don't always run on the run plays. And you're just like, so what you're basically saying is you don't really want to answer the question. You don't really want to explain the game plan that ended up with only 3 rush attempts. 3 rush attempts for 29 yards. It seems like Sirianni is trying to find excuses. And I think it's a bad look, personally. Leduc chimes in and says, if Sirianni doesn't run the ball next game, can you allow him to say he made any adjustments? No, I can't. Because Sirianni now keeps talking about, I got to be better. I got to be responsible. The whole 1% better every day. Well, I don't see where the 1% is coming from, man. He's got to do better, man. And not just say, he's got to do it. Sirianni talked all offseason about players, not plays. He talked about running an offense that was about the players on the field and not about the plays being called. He did that week 1. He didn't do it week 2. He didn't do it week 3. So I got to tell you guys, I'm concerned. Over on the text board at 609-403-0973, texter says the RPO scapegoat started with Russell Wilson in the Super Bowl. Yeah, when they lost that Super Bowl, they kept referring to the reason why they didn't run the ball with Marshawn Lynch because it was an RPO. And it's like, no, you just didn't run Marshawn Lynch when you should have on the goal line. You know what I mean? The RPO is turned into an opportunity for these coaches to actually not answer the question. And I don't like that. It's a problem. Another text coming in at 609-403-0973. Tom from Margate says, Josh, I like your critique of the Eagles owner and coach. Which of the next 5 to 6 games do you think they have a chance to win? I got to tell you, Tom, and from Margate, I appreciate you chiming in. I'm going with the Lions game on Halloween. I think that's their best chance. I think their second best chance is the Panthers game. And the only reason why I said the Panthers game is because the Panthers offense has been boom or bust at times. In week 1, they had that big pass play to Robbie Anderson. Weeks 2 and 3, they've had some big plays to DJ Moore, but they just traded away Dan Arnold, which is a very curious move because Dan Arnold has actually been a very, very good player for the Panthers. So they sacrificed a guy that Darnold had chemistry with to get more cornerback depth after J.C. Horn got injured. It kind of has to make you wonder, does the lack of Arnold in the offense impact them? Just something to think about. So the Panthers, I like their defense, but they have some injuries. Their offense has played well, but not great. So that could be a winnable game. But I would assume the Lions is the best chance they have to win the next 5-6 games. And then the Panthers are a close second. I'm going to get through more of your messages on the other side because I like some of the stuff that's coming in here. I don't want to overlook anybody's messages. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN and 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City. And of course, we are live on your radio, 97.3 ESPN FM, as well as the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City. Get to more of your messages on the other side. However you're messaging the show, I will get to you. Want to hear from you guys. And of course, when Mike Gill gets here, he'll talk more about the Eagles as well as the Phillies are pathetic. Just got to throw that out there again. Phillies are pathetic. You have a chance to win a game. You need to win a game. You're pathetic. Just totally bad. It's like Derek says over here. Let's talk about another Philly team that can't pull their heads out when needed. Hey, man. Between the Eagles head coach, the Phillies hitters last night, and the Sixers media day on Monday, we got a lot of ostriches with their heads in the sand. Back with more here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN FM.
There's only one place for live sports and sports talk in South Jersey.
Oh, yeah!
Your sports station is the 3 ESPN.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN Wednesday edition of the show. Mike will be here soon. The LPGA Pro-Am, the round that he is in. Remember, the listener won a chance to play golf with Mike Gill, Pete Thompson, and the LPGA Pro. We ran that contest last week. Well, the round went a little longer than expected. Mike Gill's planning to be here at 2 o'clock, but the round ran a little long. So he'll be here as soon as he can. It's not far away. The studio, from the studio to the golf course is not like it's that far. So he literally, when he says to me, I'll be there as soon as I can, he's not joking. He literally can just get in his car and get over here. So as soon as he can get off the course, he will be here. But in the meantime, we hear from you and more you guys here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill. 609-403-0973 is the text board. You also can direct message the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Download for free from the Apple App Store or Google Play. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And as always, we are live on YouTube and Twitter. Doug chimes in during the break there. He says, reality is our head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator are all first-time play callers. That guarantees this will require issues and ramp up. Doug, you're right. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said with the fact that it didn't have to be this way. Like I said earlier, Sean McVay hired Wade Phillips, who was double his age. He hired Greg Olson to be quarterback's coach, a guy who had coached in the league for a decade. He hired John Fossil, who had also been in the league for a decade and whose father was the Fossil who led the Giants to the Super Bowl, right? McVay surrounded himself with veteran coaches. The only veteran coach on the Eagles staff is Stoutland at this point, the offensive line holder of a coach. So, it didn't have to be this way. And I think that's where some of my concern is, Doug. This linked at the hipness between Lurie and the head coach makes me wonder how much of the hires of this staff was Sirianni's idea versus what the owner wanted. And I'm just not a big lover of the idea of not having more veteran voices in that coaching room. You don't have to be ridiculous as the Browns were a few years ago, where they had basically a ton of former big-time coaches in the room and they all clashed heads when Hugh Jackson was there, as we saw in Hard Knocks. But it would have been nice if maybe one of those other coaches had a nice long resume on it. I'm just saying. Steichen, he's really the only guy that had a decent resume of those guys, and he isn't even calling plays. Steichen was, I had to double check, how many years was he the OC with the Chargers? Because I feel like it was longer than I'm remembering, and I don't want to give you guys the wrong information here. Okay, so Steichen, how long was he with the Chargers? Okay, Steichen was with the Chargers since 2011. And he only had 2 years of an offensive coordinator. Before that, he was a quarterback's coach. So he's really the guy outside of Sirianni that has the longest resume. And that's not saying much. So, to me, I'm totally okay with people saying, listen, there's a ramp-up period. There's a learning on the job. I'm all good with that. But I want to see you actually learn on the job. When Sirianni says 1% better every day, we need accountability, I want those things to happen. A couple more messages coming in here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Texter chimed in, says, Josh, the biggest problem with the Eagles is the same problem as the Phillies. There's not enough talent on the rosters. Eagles have failed in the draft and failed building depth. When you go through a rebuild, you don't rebuild by drafting wide receivers in the first round, back-to-back drafts, when you don't know what you have at quarterback. Couple things there. Number one, I feel like it's a cop-out to say there's not enough talent, okay? These are the professional sports leagues, all right? For you to play at the highest level, you have talent, okay? I feel like, we've gotten too lazy when it comes to evaluating players and teams. I'm not going to sit here and say the Eagles don't have talent. I think that's lazy. If you want to say they don't have enough talent, I'm fine with that. Because that's what the Phillies are. Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, these guys have talent, all right? Kyle Gibson, talent. Freddie Galvis, talent. Andrew McCutchen, though, old. Odubel Herrera, not good enough. Gene Segura, inconsistent. Third base is a mess, right? Your bullpen is just a bunch of guys who are average players. So I'm more comfortable saying they don't have enough talent, as you mentioned in the text, than say they don't have talent, okay? I feel like that's a much better descriptor. Now, the problem is that when you say you don't know you have a quarterback, here's the problem with that comment. How many teams in the league really know what they have a quarterback? Let me name you the quarterbacks that we know for sure about. Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, probably Matthew Stafford. I think it's fair to say Kyler Murray's pretty secure in Arizona. I'm only at 6 right now. Lamar Jackson won an MVP, so he's pretty secure. I think Baker Mayfield, for the most part, has proven himself in Cleveland. We think we know what Joe Burrow is in Cincinnati. Who else is out there? Ryan Tannehill's established in Tennessee. I named 10 quarterbacks. That's only a third of the league. I would argue that most teams don't know what they fully have a quarterback in the NFL. So what makes the Eagles any different than anybody else? Trevor Lawrence, he's a rookie. Zach Wilson's a rookie. Mac Jones is a rookie. Josh Allen, we know what he is. That's 11 quarterbacks. Tua, can't stay healthy. Houston's a mess. Denver, nobody knows what they're doing right now. I don't mind the Eagles drafting wide receivers in the first round because it was a position of need. What I mind is the Eagles using their offseason to tell us they brought in Anthony Harris, they brought in Eric Wilson, they brought in Ryan Kerrigan, they drafted offensive line depth, they brought in this new coaching staff with this new scheme, and you look good for 1 week, and then 2 weeks, you got problems. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Michael will be joining us a little bit later as he's on his way back from the ShopRite LPGA Pro-Am. Coming up on the other side, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City joins us to get more into what is going on in Philadelphia sports. Phillies, pathetic. Eagles, embarrassing loss. Sixers, cloud hanging over their head. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City joins the show next here on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Josh Hedrick filling in for Mike Gill as he makes his way back from the ShopRite LPGA Pro-Am. Hanging out with you on a Wednesday afternoon. Get to more of your messages, a ton of them to get to. Keep them coming in here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Right now, we will be joined by Mike McGarry for the Press of Atlantic City. Of course, his appearance being brought to you by Calvi Electric, now offering residential services for your home and business. Visit them online at calvielectric.com. Mike McGarry joins us as he does on a Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike, how you doing today?
Hey, Josh, how are you?
I'm doing well, and we'll start with the ShopRite LPGA for a moment. Obviously, it's a banner day for everybody because after everything that happened last year, as you wrote about the Press of Atlantic City, the fans and the Pro-Am, they're back this year. And at least it's a measure of normalcy. At least look around and see, hey, we recognize what we see here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was out there earlier today up at Seaview in Galloway Township, and it was a measure. You put it a good way. It looked like it did in 2019. I spoke with Tim Aronson, who is the managing partner of Outlier, the company that owns and operates the Classic. He said the Pro-Am will do about 1,300 rounds today and tomorrow. They usually do about 1,500. But after doing nothing last year, it's a big boost. And, of course, the Pro-Am is kind of what financially drives the Classic. It's the engine behind the Classic. If not for the Pro-Am, you're not going to have a tournament.
Mike, let's flip it over to the Philadelphia sports team because, the Phillies, they lost again last night. Kind of a pathetic effort by them offensively. Eagles, embarrassing loss Monday night. And, of course, you have the cloud of Ben Simmons hanging over the Sixers. So, how do you rank these three situations? Because it seems like they're all pretty much negative at this point.
Yeah, well, these are tough days for Philadelphia sports fans. And let me jump in here and help some of my friends out. These are also some tough days for New York sports fans. All right, the two football teams are combined 0-6. The Mets are falling out of the playoffs. You still have the Yankees. They're hot. They look like they're going to be a wild card team, but it's not easy being a New York or Philadelphia sports fan right now. And it's just a matter of how you want to look at it. The Phillies, I'd probably put them third because their season's over. I'd put the Eagles maybe second because you're going to have to live with that a long time. And, of course, the Ben Simmons issue, I'd put that first because how that's resolved might affect the Sixers for years to come.
So let's start with the Phillies real quick, Mike, because, I didn't get a chance to talk about them too much today because obviously the topic has been heavy Eagles since we started the show. But, watching that game last night, there's a part of me that just looks at it as like, I should have expected this, right? I mean, this is a team that has been wildly inconsistent all year. They waste another Zach Wheeler start. They lose 2-1 in a game that, it took them until the ninth inning to even muster anything across home plate.
Yeah, I mean, in our heart of hearts, I think we all of us who have watched the Phillies play multiple games this season or followed them since April, in our heart of hearts, we know they're not a playoff team. A couple of times they raised our hopes, that 8-game winning streak earlier in the summer. Their play last week when they kind of, beat up on the Baltimore Orioles and the Pittsburgh Pirates and kind of put themselves in position to do some things. But, those of us who watch the team on our daily basis, on our heart of hearts, we kind of knew this was the way it's going to end. And what I wrote about, what kind of struck me about last night's game is, kind of what might have been or the mistakes the Phillies have made. You want to know why they're not in the playoffs since 2011. I mean, they traded for Charlie Morton back in 2015. Now, he only pitched 4 games here. He had a torn hamstring, was lost for the season, and then he goes on and signs as a free agent and ends up pitching for the Astros, Tampa Bay, and, of course, Atlanta, and shuts down Philadelphia last night. But there's a guy who's won 64 games since the Phillies had him in 2015. So it's almost a case of, so close but yet so far. They identified Morton's talent. They saw him as a player to trade for. They get him, and he just doesn't do anything here because of injuries. And that's, those are the things are big reasons why you haven't made the playoffs since 2011. It seems like you can't get anything to go their way.
Now, you mentioned Morton, but that was a previous quote-unquote GM, man in charge. It's Dombrowski now. So I'm assuming there's going to be some changes this offseason, considering that Dombrowski joined the organization in the middle of the offseason. So how different could this team look like next year, Mike?
Yeah, we're going to have to see. I mean, obviously some changes need to be made, and Dombrowski has shown that he's not shy about making those changes, right? He's kind of revamped the farm system, shuffled some people around there. So we know that he sees that there's problems with the way the Phillies are doing things in the past and things they have to be changed to be improved in the future. So I don't think Dave Dombrowski, I don't think he's certainly not going to stand pat. It's a question of what kind of changes will be made.
Mike McGarry joining us here on a Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN at AC Press McGarry. On Twitter, check out all of his coverage of everything from Philadelphia sports to local high school sports over at the pressofatlanticcity.com. Mike, the NFC East, it feels very one-sided right now. It feels like it's the Cowboys and everybody else. The Eagles, an embarrassing loss. The Giants can't seem to get out of their own way. And Washington, I feel like they're almost getting worse every week. So it feels like this division is definitively the Cowboys to lose at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch the games the first 3 weeks of the season, you have to say the Cowboys are head and shoulders above everybody else right now. They looked impressive Monday night against the Eagles. That win in Los Angeles against the Chargers looks even better this week after the Chargers beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And just the eye test tells you that the Cowboys are better. And the biggest disappointment right now is the Washington football team's defense. It has not lived up to certainly what I thought it would be. It has certainly not lived up to any sort of preseason hype. And they're at 1-2, and their one victory is the last second victory over the New York Giants. So you've got the Giants at 0-3 who are inventing ways to lose football games. It seems no matter what they have to do to lose a football game, they're going to do it. You have Washington at a disappointing defense at 1-2, and you have the Eagles who are making people like me who thought they'd be 5-12 before the season started looking pretty good, with a lot of injuries on the offensive line and an inexperienced coaching staff that has kind of hurt it the first 3 weeks of the season.
You mentioned inexperienced coaching staff. I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of my questions today, Mike, is that how much of this is because Sirianni never called plays before. He's a head coach for 3 games. Almost his entire staff is basically young guys. You know, he doesn't have a bunch of veterans. Like when Sean McVay went to the Rams, he hired Wade Phillips and Greg Olson and all these veteran coaches. And it's like Sirianni has a bunch of young guys who are basically his age outside of Stoutland. So how much of the Eagles' problems are potentially the coaching staff just being so inexperienced and basically on-the-job learning?
Well, I think it's one of the problems, and it was one of the things I was concerned about before the season. Like you said, they don't have that veteran coordinator. You know, they don't have what Andy Reid did, hire the veteran defensive coordinator when he first came in. And that experience has showed in some of the play calling so far early in the season. I thought it would hurt them, and it has, especially in the 2 defeats. So I think it's been a big factor in their 1-2 start.
That's the other thing, Mike. The NFC East is a weird situation because you have Mike McCarthy, who won a Super Bowl, but I think we all realize that was Aaron Rodgers more so than Mike McCarthy. And Ron Rivera got to a Super Bowl, but he also had the league MVP that year, right? And then you have Joe Judge, and then you have Nick Sirianni. The NFC East is a very strange division with its coaching situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And all you need to do is look at the last, minute of the first half on Monday night when everybody in America wanted Mike McCarthy to call a timeout, and he just let the time run off the clock there. And the biggest disappointment in the division coaching-wise might be Joe Judge of the New York Giants. Most Giants fans kind of thought or assumed that they had found their answer to their coaching woes in Joe Judge. And you look at the 0-3 start and how this team is losing, and you're starting to wonder now, hey, is this guy who we thought he was? So, the Giants, when it comes to the coaching staff, might have the biggest issues.
Mike McGarry for the Press of Atlantic City joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, as he does every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Josh Henning filling in for Mike Gill, who I just got an update. He is entering the 18th hole on the ShopRite Pro-Am at the LPGA. So, Mike, Gill was hoping to be here by 2, and apparently that didn't work out too well for him. So everybody's got me for now.
Yeah, those Pro-Am rounds can drag sometimes. They can be 5-6 hour affairs on the old Pro-Am. And look, with this weather out there, it's such a nice day. I'm sure he's not rushing back to finish. So,
well, I only think he wants to get back because Gill is one of those people. For those who don't know, he's he wants things done a certain way. He has a plan for how he's going to go about his day. He's somebody who likes to be productive. So right now, there's probably a part of him that's being like, I've been out here for a little too long now, kind of thing.
Well, you better, if you want to be productive on a day you're playing golf, you better hit him straight. And something tells me that he's not. So there you go.
Mike, before I let you go, if you had to put a timetable on this Ben Simmons Sixers stuff, is this going to be something that just only lasts the preseason? Could this last until the trade deadline? Could this potentially be like Le'Veon Bell with the Steelers a few years ago and last the entire year with Ben Simmons?
Yeah, there's a lot of, exaggeration on both sides. Both sides are kind of digging their heels in right now. To me, it plays out the same way that the James Harden situation played out last year, except Ben Simmons is going to sit out. He's not going to show up overweight, out of shape, and play poorly. This is going to end probably in late November, early December with Simmons being traded. That's the timetable I see. I don't see Ben Simmons sitting out the season. I don't see it lasting to the trade deadline. I see this resolving itself in late November, early December, similar to the way the James Harden situation played out last year.
Give him a follow on Twitter. That's AC Press McGarry on Twitter. Check out all of his coverage over with the Press of Atlantic City, over at pressofatlanticcity.com. And he'll join the show again on Friday. Mike Gill will be here for the full show that day. So, Mike, hope you got to enjoy some of the weather yourself, and we'll hear from you again on Friday.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. See you down the road.
And, of course, Mike McGarry's appearance here on the Sports Bash being brought to you by Calvi Electric, now offering residential services for your home and business. Visit them online at calvielectric.com. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill as Mike Gill is finishing up at the LPGA Pro-Am. He will be here as soon as he can. He's not too far away, but he will be here when the round is done. Josh Hennig filling in on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Still to come, Jason Fitz, ESPN radio host from Spain and Fitz. Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, as well as Jeff Kerr, CBS NFL writer. I want to squeeze in one message in before we hit the break. We got a bunch of messages still to get to. Messages: the way Sirianni calls plays for the Eagles tells you he had basically no say in the Colts offense as they pounded a lot with Jonathan Taylor last year. He seems to be making it up as he goes along. Listen, man, there's a very strong possibility that Sirianni literally is learning on the job. I don't mean just like, hey, you're figuring out as you go along. No, I think he's literally learning on the job. And that could be a good thing in the fact that he can learn from his mistakes and get better, but it might be a bad thing. Because like you said, the play calling definitely is not reflective of what we saw in Indianapolis. By the way, the Eagles have made a couple of roster moves. They promoted Suo Peta to the active roster and signed Casey Tucker to the practice squad. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. 3 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union. Choose better banking for great rates on loans, refinancing, and credit cards, free or low-cost financial products, and friendly personal service. Visit JerseyShoreFCU.org. That's Jersey Shore F as in Frank, C as in cow, U as in union.org for more information. Mike Gill still finishing up his round at the ShopRite LPGA Pro-Am. It's a beautiful day out. I was just telling Mike Gill, we were just messaging, and I was like, at least it's a beautiful day out there. It's a beautiful day out there to enjoy some golf. The guy, the individual who won the contest, they're out there. It's Mike, it's Pete Thompson, it's the LPGA Pro, and it's a winner of the contest. I know Dave Weinberg's out there too. So it's a big day for people to be out there, enjoy the weather. And the Pro-Am's a big deal for this area for the ShopRite Classic, which is this weekend. Of course, you can watch that over on the Golf Channel. So Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill, as mentioned here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. We got a bunch of messages for you guys to get to. We're talking a lot of Eagles, a little Phillies as well here in the first hour. So I want to get to a bunch of your messages, catch up on them here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the text board is 609-403-0973. Priority messaging into the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. And of course, we got messages coming in on YouTube and Twitter, just like we got a message here from Jay, who chimes in and says, we're done. Only great player we have on defense is Hargraves. This is going to be a joke, these next 8 losses. That's from Jay watching on the YouTube stream. Listen, Jay, it's not that you're wrong. They're probably going to lose a chunk of games coming up. I mentioned this last week. If you didn't win the Cowboys game, you're probably going to be losers of 6 straight going into the Lions game, because the Chiefs this week, the Panthers next week, the Bucks the week after that, and then traveling to Vegas to the Raiders. I don't know how you win all those games. I think the only game that's winnable right now, barring any major injury or change, is the Panthers game. Because unless Mahomes and Brady get injured, I don't see you beating either of those teams. And I'm worried that they're going to go to Vegas and some of these young players are going to get caught up in the moment, and Hurts is going to be the only sober guy walking onto the field who's under the age of 30 the next day. Because I believe in Jalen Hurts. He's a professional. He's a hard worker. But I don't know about all these other guys yet. I think some of them are still young. They're still learning how to be in the league. I mean, let's be realistic. How many of these coaches are even that old? I mean, most of this coaching staff is still in their late 30s, early 40s. They're not exactly old either. They're not exactly experienced in the full season being in charge. Guys like Sirianni and Steichen and Gannon and Petula, most of these guys spent the majority of their time coaching in the NFL as either position coaches or assistants to coordinators. You get to Vegas, you know what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Remember a couple of years ago when the Eagles went down to Miami? And that Dolphins game, I mean, they looked really poor. And people were like, what happened to the Eagles? And I was like, well, they are in Miami. They call it the Miami flu for a reason. How many teams are going to go to Vegas this year and they're going to lose because they went to Vegas? I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. I'm not accusing anybody anything, but I'm just letting you guys know the Vegas game, if there's a potential trap game in the NFL, in college, it's the idea of big win, let down the week after, right? Well, this could be the letdown game for somebody on their schedule, whether it's the Eagles or somebody else. Someone's going to go to Vegas. They're going to be expected to have a competitive game, and they're going to absolutely get trounced by the Raiders. I'm guaranteeing you that right now. Watch this season. Hold on one sec. Give me one hot second. I'm going to pull up the Raiders schedule. I'm going to try to predict a team that's going to go to Vegas that is going to live it up the weekend because their coach didn't fly them in close enough to game time. And then they're going to go out there and they're going to get absolutely smashed by the black and silver. Let's see here. Home games. Bears. Maybe. Who knows with Nagy? Nagy's a weird guy. Sirianni and the Eagles, they might be it. Chiefs won't. Andy Reid runs a tight ship there. Maybe it's the Bengals. Week 11. Young coach Zach Taylor is younger and less experienced than Nick Sirianni is. He's been coaching for a couple years in Cincinnati. He even has less NFL experience as a coach than Sirianni does. I could totally see the Bengals going to Vegas, going out the night before, staying out past curfew. Maybe it's a couple of the wide receivers hanging out together, maybe a couple of defensive players. That team's going to get crushed later this year. I totally see it happening. That's the team to watch out for. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Mike Gill will be joining us as soon as he is done at the LPGA Pro-Am. The round is going a little longer than they expected, so he'll join us a little bit later. We'll get to more of your messages here on the Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Texture chimes in over here at 609-403-0973. Philip says, when will this team get some real linebackers? It's a major weakness. That's from Philip over at 609-403-0973. Here's the thing, Philip. I think that the problem with the linebackers isn't they don't have real linebackers. I think they're misusing them because we were told all offseason about how Eric Wilson was a major upgrade, right? We saw in week 1 that Sean Bradley actually played a very good game. He was a tackling machine, right? We know that they've been developing and working with Davion Taylor, but he got injured with the calf and the hamstring, soft tissue injuries in training camp. So he's behind the curve. So is it that the Eagles don't have real linebackers? Or is it possible that Gannon doesn't fully use them properly? Because why is it that for 2 weeks you allowed 23 points, 6 to the Falcons, 17 to the 49ers, and then the Cowboys just wrecked you? I mean, they punched you in the face again and again. They broke your nose and you didn't ever make an adjustment. Do the linebackers need to be better? Yes. Philip, you're right about that. But I think they have real linebackers. But I think Gannon did a horrible job at adjusting on Monday night. You look back at the one touchdown pass, the Dalton Schultz. What happened on the plays before that? They were doing that cover shell, those 2 safeties over the top. The Cowboys kept running the ball and screen game, and they kept luring them in. And the moment that Gannon brought the safety down, play action, tight end, boom. And Gannon never adjusted after that. It seemed like Gannon was behind everything that Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott were doing all night. So there's a part of me that wonders, did Gannon just have a bad day at the office and he kept putting his players out of position? Because there were so many times the Eagles defense was leaning left and the Cowboys went right, or or vice versa. Like, it just seemed like almost every time the Cowboys called a play, Gannon didn't have the guys prepared on the field. So there's a part of me that wonders, do the Eagles have linebackers, but Gannon isn't using them properly? More messages coming in here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Jade Margate chimes in. Says, Josh, I wasn't very excited about the pick for head coach back when they made it. And so far, that doubt is rewarded over and over. I'm not sold yet that he'll be out after this year, but it all feels so stitched together from the players to the coaches. Jay from Margate goes on to say, I fear a total teardown and rebuild is coming. People poop on the Eagles, but we have been the second best team in the NFC East for almost 20 years. It feels like it's coming apart. That's from Jay and Margate. Well, Jay, remember, it gets back to what I was saying earlier in the show, and I wrote about it at 973ESPN.com. Part of this is the owner. It seems like the Chip Kelly experiment triggered something or did something to the owner, because when Lurie hired coaches like Ray Rhodes and Andy Reid and Chip Kelly, he wasn't a micromanager. He wasn't hyper involved in things in terms of, the football side of things. Like, he was involved because he's the owner, but he kind of took a position of, hey man, I hired people to do the job. I'm going to let them do the job. It's like the Chip Kelly thing really messed with him. And he talked about things ever since then, weird stuff about, being 5 years ahead of being 5 years ahead, and having coached with emotional intelligence, and, being offensively innovative, and, wanting his organization to be competitive at all costs. And, it seems like the owner now, Sirianni said it today at the press conference. He said, oh, Jeffrey Lurie and I, we talk all week. Let me tell you something. I've never worked at a job where the owner or the top of the food chain talks with the people who are under him almost every day of the week. Never, ever, ever. Unless you're going to count, I mean, even Jerry Jones isn't in Mike McCarthy's ear all the time. You go back and watch Hard Knocks. Jerry Jones is more interested in his celebrity than he is in connecting with his coaches all the time. There are tons of times that Jerry Jones could have just wandered on the field. Now he's in his office. He's making phone calls. He's eating his salad that they talked about in episode 1. Like, Jerry Jones, for as much of a micromanager he is, he's not meeting with Mike McCarthy as much as Sirianni is suggesting that he's doing with Lurie. So the part of me that wonders, J.M. Margate, how much of this that we're seeing from the head coach is a reflection of the owner? Because the owner wanted this guy. The owner said, I want Sirianni, I want Gannon. All the reports are that Sirianni didn't just get the job because Lurie connected with him, but because Sirianni wanted to hire Jonathan Gannon to be his D coordinator. And Gannon was a hot commodity around the league. People think he's a future head coach in this league. When we talk about it feeling so stitched together, when we talk about it's potentially coming apart, when we talk about the fact that you're not sold on the situation, Jay, I got to ask you, are you not just not sold on the head coach? How much of this also is the owner? More messages coming in here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM. Josh Hennick hanging out with you here on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. A couple more messages here on the Bash. Text coming in from Tom in the Villas at 609-403-0973 says, to me, it's like a bunch of old frat brothers decided to coach a football team. And Jeffrey Lurie said, sure, here you go. Tom in the Villas. Yeah, man, I'm not hating on the guys because of their age, because age is not a reflection of ability to do a job or maturity. But there's something to be said with the fact that Gannon, Sirianni, Steichen, Patullo, these are all guys who are about around the same age, about around the same amount of NFL coaching experience, roughly the same path through the ranks in the NFL. Yeah, Tom, there's something to say the fact I mentioned this earlier. You want to have people that you can work with, that you can connect with. But being the same age or the same experience is not always reflective of everything, right? It's, when you think about, what goes on with a hiring process, did Lurie factor any of this in Was he so focused on finding someone who is not Doug Peterson? Was he so focused on finding, I should say, somebody who was different than the guy that he fired, that he went out of his way and didn't really factor some of these things in? I think Tom from the Villas, you bring up an interesting question. You know, it feels like almost it's a bunch of bros who are running a football team right now. And the owner is like the dad who's enabling their extracurricular activities. More messages coming in here on the text board, 609-403-0973. Also get to your messages over on the YouTube stream at 973 ESPN on YouTube and Twitter. And also you can get your messages prioritized through the DM feature on the 973 ESPN mobile app. Any message that comes in through the 973 ESPN mobile app gets priority recognition and priority read on the air, thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. Another text comes in and says, Atlanta stinks. I don't want to hear they look good against them. They should be judged against these real teams. Well, texter, listen, you can stand by the Atlanta stinks position all you want, but the reality is that this is the NFL. All right. You still have to win who's in front of you. These are professional athletes. You know, I understand that we live in a society that has, dumbed us down and brainwashed us to use simple ways of thinking, like they're stupid, he sucks. I understand that we live in that kind of world. All right. But here's the reality. Week after the Eagles beat down the Falcons then went on the road. They still put up 25 against the Bucs. I don't want to hear about was garbage time, okay? You're still scoring on NFL players, so on pros. Then you go to New York and you make the Giants look like a worse organization than you. So realistically, if the Falcons stink, as you want to verbalize it, Texter, then the Giants have to stink worse. And the Bucs' second and third best players stink worse than the Falcons. Because here's the deal. You go back and re-watch the Falcons game. The Falcons scored 0 points in the fourth quarter. The Tampa Bay Bucs did all the scoring in the fourth quarter. The Falcons did all their scoring in the second and third quarters. So don't tell me that Tampa let them back in the game or took their foot off the pedal. No. The Falcons found a way to score on the Bucs in the meat of the game. And then Tampa pulled away from them and woke up and realized we have a game on our hands. We got to play some football. So you can preach all you want that the Falcons stink. But the reality is that the Falcons are a professional NFL team, and everyone on their team is better than fill-in-the-blank college team. Okay? This isn't college football. I try to explain this to people all the time. I don't understand if people just don't want to accept this or people just don't want to hear it. You know, it's got to be one of the two, right? But think about it like this. Look at this organization, okay? These are professional athletes. All their day is spent watching football, analyzing football 24/7, right? This isn't college where guys have classes and they have frat parties and they're distracted by 20 other things that have nothing to do with football, and they're only practicing X number of hours a week because of, school rules. This isn't, Clemson lost to NC State this past weekend. Okay, let's use a tangible example. NC State was at home. Clemson has had a rough year. They struggled offensively. They have no identity. They had to go to NC State in front of a crazy crowd, the first real road game of Clemson's season, and they lost in double overtime. This is not the same as that. These are professional athletes. So people can try to paint the Falcons all they want. But let me tell you something. until you're willing to walk up to the Atlanta Falcons players and tell them that they stink, and then you start going through their roster and you realize that half the teams in the league would love to have Matt Ryan instead of their quarterback, and half teams in the league would love to have Calvin Ridley, and more than half teams love to have Deion Jones, and half teams would love to have Mike Davis right now as one of their running backs. Russell Gage would look really good on certain teams. They don't stink. They're just not a playoff team. There's a huge difference. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of CLC. I'll get to more of your messages throughout the show. Keep them coming in as we're hanging out with you. Of course, Sports Bash being brought to you by Deborah Heart and Lung Center. When it's your heart, you don't take chances. Be sure to demand Deborah. That's Deborah.org for more information. Deborah Heart and Lung Center. Of course, we still have football at 4, powered by the Inside Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher joins the show coming up at 4 p.m. All that and more still to come here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennick filling for Mike Gill, who's over at the ShopRite LPGA Pro-Am right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill. Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank Seattle City. Sports Bash being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia, they want to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Still to come, football at 4. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast joins us coming up at 4 p.m. today. Still want to hear from you guys out there. We still got some more messages to work through. Of course, you can direct message the show, priority messaging from the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. Text board is open as well, 609-403-0973. And we are live as always at 973 ESPN on YouTube and Twitter. You know, with the Eagles, it's one of those deals where I don't have all the answers, but I have a ton of questions. At this point with the Eagles, it's to me, it's not about, I don't know for sure what this team is, but I'm pretty sure who they're not, right? I'm not 100% sure what this team can do. I'm very sure what this team can't do. And when I look at the NFC East, that's why I asked Mike McGarry what I did earlier. It was the question of these NFC East teams. This division is the Cowboys to lose. And there's a question of where do the rest of the teams go from here? You know, Washington was depending on an old quarterback to stabilize them. And now they look like that last year might have been a fluke at this point, the way their team is playing overall. You look at a team like, for example, the Giants, they invent ways to lose. They just are really pathetic. You know, for a coach who's supposed to be all about discipline and hard nose and running laps and tough guy Joe Judge, you know, if you were placing bets on who wins a Royal Rumble match between NFL coaches, Joe Judge is probably up there. He's probably one of the betting favorites, him and Mike Tomlin. But while Tomlin has his team winning games over the years, Joe Judge's team has started 0-2 every year he's been there and every year before he got there. So for a guy who's supposed to come in and change the culture is still losing. And then you have the Eagles. And Sirianni saying, I got to do a better job pretty much at every press conference. Great. Thanks. Thanks for the insight, buddy. Oh, my goodness. Jalen chimes in. Says about Washington. It says, I thought Washington could have had a chance that defensive talent. Somehow they have been horrendous. That's the thing, man. I'm starting to wonder if when it comes to Washington, if they're a team that was maybe a flash in the pan, right? Because that defense looked elite last year. And realistically, they only lost one guy from the defense, Ryan Kerrigan. And they added a pretty good linebacker in Davis in the first round of the draft. So I was under the impression that this team was going to be contenders in this division. And now they look like pretenders. And I don't know if that's because last year was maybe an anomaly. Maybe, you know, people have just figured out what Washington's doing offensively and defensively, and they're easy to read. I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, you know, look, I'm at the point where I have more faith in the Eagles to figure it out than Washington. And that's not saying much. Because at this point, you know, did the guys last year just get up because Ron Rivera had cancer, and this year that Ron Rivera's fine, they're just like, oh yeah, whatever? Like, I don't know what the issue is with Washington, but they got problems, man. Geoff chimes in about the Eagles and says, was our expectations for the Eagles too high? I don't know, man. I don't know if the expectations were too high. I think that depends on who you ask. You know, Mike McGarry said that he thought this was a 5-win team. If you asked me, I thought this was a 7 or 8-win team. That still means that you have a losing record. That still means you're not a playoff team. So, anybody who thought this team was going to win 10, 11 games, maybe their expectations were too high, but I never thought this was going to be a winning football team. I just thought that they would have looked a little differently than they do right now after the Atlanta game. Because to me, I'm a big believer in if something works, keep doing it until they stop you. It's one of the oldest concepts in football. One of the oldest concepts in football is, all right, we're running this play. We're going to keep running it until they stop us. And even if they do stop us, we might still run it again. For the Eagles, I'm really wondering if, did Sirianni just not understand that concept? Did he try to outthink the room? Did Jeffrey Lurie get in his ear and say you need to pass the ball more? I don't know what it is, but it's something weird, man. It's something weird. Because when you lose, you say, okay, why did we lose? We're not doing that. Okay. If a play doesn't work, how many times you see a coach on their play sheet during a game, right? You look at these coaches like the Kyle Shanahans of the world and the Frank Reichs and the Andy Reeds and the Bruce Arians. These veteran coaches, what do? When a play works or doesn't work, you see them on the sideline making a note on their sheet. Sirianni got that big pink marker in his hat. Does he ever use that pink marker? Or is that just there for decoration? Is that like a good luck charm? I don't know what that is. Josh Eddick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Dan from EHC chimes in and says, it's weird, but 2 different times the Eagles hit rock bottom after their alpha male defensive players have left, Brian Dawkins and now Malcolm Jenkins. There might be something to that. I don't know if that's all of the story, because I got to double check. What exactly was the year that Dawkins left? Let me double check that, because I feel like that's the interesting narrative, but the timing might not play out. Okay. So Doc went to the Broncos in 2009. The 2009 Eagles made the playoffs and they lost to the Cowboys. The next year, they went 10-6, made the playoffs, lost to the Packers, and won the Super Bowl. Then the next year, they went 8-8. Now, those are the 3 years that Dawkins played in Denver. So that timing doesn't really line up. The Malcolm Jenkins thing, I think, is less about them losing Malcolm than about the fact is they never replaced him. If you have a leader who has that kind of pedigree, right? You have a leader who goes out there and just, is playing every snap of every down of every game like Malcolm was. You lose that. How do you fill that void? And it felt like he never did. It felt like they never they never filled in. They never got the job done when it came to Malcolm Jenkins. I don't know. It's weird because I think that the Eagles at times overthink the room. I think sometimes, the Eagles don't value the intangibles. They value things that don't make sense to like the regular person. To me, there's a huge difference between all these guys in a think tank in the front office making a decision and then just the average football guy just sitting down and saying, hey, this team needs X, Y, Z. You got to wonder, for as smart as Louis Riddick is and how badly almost half the team's fan bases in the league would love to have him as their GM, you have to think, is Louis Riddick not being hired because maybe some of these teams he would tell the owner no, and the owner wants a yes man in that position of power? It's something to think about. Get one more message in here before we hit the break. And yes, Malcolm Jenkins did have a pick six this week. Although part of that was because I think Mac Jones completely misread the defense on that play. You go back and watch that play, you could tell that Mac completely misread the situation. I don't know if that was because the play was supposed to go to that side of the field and he didn't have like another option, or if he misunderstood the play. I don't know what it was, but I think Mac just had a horrible interception on that play. And Malcolm Jenkins just played him like a fiddle at that point. And Jeff's right. The Eagles kept Jason Peters instead of Malcolm. Listen, man, that whole situation is weird. I mean, look at Jason Peters now. He's in Chicago. He's getting his quarterback killed. It's ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. Jason Peters is just poor. That guy needs to go home and just call it a career. I mean, that one play where he lays Myles Garrett and he gets Justin Fields blasted. You know, you're just kind of wondering at that point. You're like, is Jason Peters just collecting a paycheck? On the text board at 609-403-0973, Nick from Seaville chimes in and says, every Eagles coach, including Andy Reid, has been pass happy. I'm starting to wonder if the front office is more on influence of play calling than we think. Nick, I mentioned this earlier in the show, man. I told you guys earlier, Jeffrey Lurie wants these progressive offenses. He wants to be 5 years ahead of being 5 years ahead. He wants offensive innovation. He's always looking for the next super offensive genius. Ever since he got Andy Reid, he's become intoxicated with this idea that he's going to find the next Andy Reid. And he found a Super Bowl winning head coach who he couldn't agree with after a while anymore. He hired Chip Kelly, and that blew up in his face at the end. And now he's got Sirianni. And Sirianni confirmed to the media today that him and Jeffrey Lurie talk all week long. So you ask about the front office. I'm going above the front office. I'm going to the owner. Does the owner understand what wins in the NFL? Or is the owner getting bad advice? I don't know. Is the owner too dependent on analytics? Is the owner too involved in the game plan? Is Sirianni a yes man for Jeffrey Lurie? Thanks to Nick from Seaville chiming in on the text board at 609-403-0973. Don't forget, you can download the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free. Thanks First Bank of Seattle City from the Apple App Store or Google Play. DM the show through the app. You get all your latest coverage of the Eagles, Sixers, Phillies, and Flyers, as well as high school sports right there from 97.3 ESPN.com on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City. We'll get to more of your messages coming up on the other side. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill. Mike's over at the ShopRite LPGA Pro-Am. You know, the individual who won the contest last week. Got to play golf today with Mike Gill, Pete Thompson, an LPGA Pro. And that's lucky winner. Got to all go on the golf course today. Have a good time. It's a beautiful day to play golf as well. So I don't begrudge him at all for that. I mean, come on. You get to go outside and have a beautiful day outside, fresh weather. You know, LPGA Classic back in town, the big thing for this area. So good for them, man. I'm a little jealous. Josh Hennig hanging out with you here on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher still to come, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast at 4 p.m. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Still to come, football at 4. Geoff Mosher will join us from the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff joins the show every Monday and Wednesday. Tomorrow on the Sports Bash, while Mike Gill is over at Chickies and Peas, he'll be joined by Adam Kaplan, NFL Insider, Andrew Checo on Friday, football at 4. But today, Geoff Mosher joins the show here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to more of your messages in just a bit here. 609-403-0973 is text for, or you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Just like Big D over in Dover chimes in on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, says, Nick is 100% a yes man. That's why he was hired, says Big D over in Delaware. Yeah, man, listen. I'm starting to wonder about Nick. I don't think Nick's a bad coach, okay? I'm not going to get it twisted. But you can't go from a great game plan in week 1 to the opposite week 2 and a worse one week 3 and then just rationalize and say, I got to do a better job. That's not the answer I'm looking for, man. Get to more of your messages in just a moment here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on Wednesday afternoon. Of course, Sports Bash being brought to you the 3 o'clock hour by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union. Choose better banking for great rates on loans, refinancing, and credit cards. Free to low-cost financial products and friendly personal service. Visit JerseyShoreFCU.org for more information. That's JerseyShoreFCU.org for more information. By the way, I mentioned a little bit earlier, and I'll kind of bring it back to the front here. Eagles made a couple of transactional moves today. They promoted Sua Opeta to the active roster. They've signed Casey Tucker and Cameron Malvo. I gotta double check that, to the practice squad. So no Isaac Seumalo for the rest of the year. Brandon Brooks is going to miss a few more weeks. Jack Driscoll's practice window was just activated. So a lot of stuff going on there with the Eagles offensive line. Not great. Not a great situation. Couple more messages coming in. We'll get to them here. 609-403-0973. Croce chimes in and says, for me, it's based on wins and losses. When it comes to judging Sirianni and his staff, it is how he alters the game plan and makes his adjustments as the game progresses. So far, he hasn't done squat other than cramming a square into a circle hole all game long. Wins and losses come and go as a rookie head coach, but you either got football IQ or you don't. That's from Croce over on the text board. Yeah, man, listen. I think that the lack of in-game adjustment is definitely concerning, but it's one of the concerning things, right? It's not the most concerning thing to me. The most concerning thing is how many times can you lie to yourself? You can say anything you want to somebody else, but when Sirianni goes home at night, or when Sirianni's by himself in the office, or when Sirianni is by himself watching game tape and taking notes, is he being true to himself? Is he being the guy who said we're going to be 1% better every day? We're going to preach accountability and fundamentals. Is he the guy who is living up to those things? Because people notice after a while who you are. The players love Hurts because they see the work ethic he has, the leadership qualities he has. They see the time he puts in. But do they feel that way about Sirianni? I'm not saying anybody's bailing on him, but does the message grade over time as the year progresses and Sirianni doesn't get 1% better every day, when Sirianni's game plans continue to fail, if he doesn't learn from his mistakes, do we get to a situation where the players start bailing on the coach. Couple more messages coming in here. 609-403-0973. Texture says, Josh, I think Jeff Lurie looked at the new young wave of coaches like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, and Cliff Kingsbury. He said, I want my own young coach who looks and sounds like those guys, because you had a guy in Deuce who is way more qualified in-house. Listen, man, I think that is a very valid explanation. Because as I wrote over on the website, I think Jeffrey Lurie thinks that he wants to be like this futurist, this forward-thinking football owner, right? With the analytics and all this different stuff. So, listen, there may be a factor in there that he looked at Doug Peterson, he looked at Deuce Staley, he looked at the coaches who were here over the years and said, no, I still want the fancy sports car. I still want the shiny new toy. I still want something else. I think it's a very strong possibility. And by the way, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, and Matt LaFleur all come from the same coaching tree. They all at one point or another worked together. All three of those guys. Kingsbury's the exception. Kingsbury, he was pretty much hired because of Kyler Murray and the situation with the quarterbacks, right? He wasn't really hired because of some of those other things. And also because the Steve Wilkes experiment in Arizona went so sideways. But there might be something to the fact that Lurie did look around the league and said, I want my own young coach. I think it's a very valid thing to ask. Let's squeeze one more message in here on 97.3 ESPN. Texter says, why is everyone from the game commentators to you guys on the radio and even the average Joe like me can see what the Eagles need to do, but the coaches and the front office cannot come close to seeing it? Well, it's ego. That's why. Why does anyone not see the forest for the trees? Unless you have a valid reason for being contrarian, unless you have a valid position, right? Like, everyone's buying Toyota Priuses, and I don't like Toyota for XYZ, so I'm going to go out and buy a Honda hybrid, right? Unless you're taking a position that is, not, that's contrarian but has valid reasoning, that's one thing. But like you said, there's a point in time where everyone else sees there's something wrong and you don't. Being contrarian, being different, being advanced and evolved, it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense after a while. All right, coming up next, we'll get in the morning with Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. They were breaking down the film this morning on the Inside the Birds pod. We'll ask Geoff about that, as well as the Eagles' latest moves, I should say, with the roster. Josh Henning filling for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash 97.3. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on a Wednesday edition on 97.3 ESPN. Mike over there at the ShopRite LPGA Pro-Am. But as usual, joining us every Wednesday, he is reliable. He is Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, joining us here as they broke down the film on the pod this morning. So we'll get into all of that with Geoff right now here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff, good to see you. How you doing?
Good to see you too. Nice to talk to you as always, Josh.
By the way, if anyone hasn't said it, one of my favorite things is your new background setup. I think it's a very clean look.
It's good for the branding, you know?
Well, it's good for the branding, but it's also good for the fact that, you know, it's kind of got that color scheme where it's not like harsh on the eyes. Like, one of the things I hate about some of these YouTube people is that their backgrounds, like, you're trying to watch them, but their background's got so much going on. You're like, I'm getting dizzy over here.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm not a big fan of the virtual screens either, where it looks like you're kind of like coming out of some vapors or something behind you because it's wavy. So I like this. This is good.
No, it is definitely good. Geoff, I mentioned that this morning on the pod, you guys were starting to break down the film from all your sources. And, you know, after listening to Sirianni today, I have some concerns, man, because when I pair between what you guys said this morning on the podcast, talking about the problems that you guys saw from the play calling to what the quarterback did, and then Sirianni today saying stuff like, well, you know, we count the RPO as a run play, even if we don't run the ball. And right. I'm just like, you know, when he says stuff like that, it makes me concerned. How do you translate that stuff?
Well, some of it is, and I give Nick credit for this. I mean, he probably explains things a little bit more than your average head coach, right? And I think what he was trying to get at, because he was specifically asked the question, by the way, it's not like he tried to come up with an excuse, but what he was trying to say, sort of in his defense, I guess, is that he didn't enter the game with the plan to just run the ball 3 times. And there were runs built into the offense more than just 3 times, even though they were losing. I think he's trying to convey the fact that this offense has some optionality to it. And there are things that they see and that they're reading in a defense that, you know, is a planned run, but it's really an RPO, run pass option. So if the defense does something different than they expect, or if the numbers invite the run, or if the numbers are against the run, then they're going to throw the ball. So I do agree, though, there was some mixed messaging when you just sit there and say, look, we've got to run the ball more. We've got to have balance. But then you start to talk about certain RPOs being considered runs. It didn't inspire a whole lot of confidence, I think, for the public to think that this couldn't happen again, theoretically.
If it does happen again.
Well, that's where I think we all have to use our own, sorry to interrupt you, our own judgment and our own brains and say, do we really think Nick Sirianni is just going to coach the exact same way going forward all the time? I highly doubt that. I'm sure he and Jalen Hurts are going to talk about times where it's important to keep an honest run game going, even if you feel like the opportunity there is a pass, or that's really just on Nick Sirianni to take his RPO playbook and maybe whittle it down a little bit to not give Jalen Hurts so many options to change the play.
Okay, so let me change my question then, because I like what you just said there. It was very interesting, because you mentioned that how Sirianni and Hurts. So how do we divvy up the responsibility? Because the way Sirianni made it sound was, you know, well, Hurts can judge the play, but Hurts, he never answered the question fully as Hurts changing the plays at the line of scrimmage, which infers to me that Hurts isn't like, you know, going rogue like Aaron Rodgers used to with Mike McCarthy, right? So how much do we place on the play caller and how much do we place on the quarterback, considering the quarterback has only started 7 games in the NFL, but the play caller has only had 3 games as a head coach / play caller?
Well, it's sort of like asking if me and Mike Gill were to burn your house down, Josh, and Mike throws the gasoline on the house and I light the match. Is one of us more culpable than the other? You know, I mean, I don't want to kill Nick Sirianni because I think too much. Although, I mean, listen, he did a terrible job. But what I'm saying is, philosophically, when you went into the year, what did most people say about the offense and Jalen Hurts? Is that he did so well as an RPO quarterback at Oklahoma that it would only make sense to build a heavy RPO offense around him this year, and that would be the best situation for him. So I can't crush Nick Sirianni for wanting to run a lot of RPOs. Even though he didn't do that a lot in Indianapolis, because he's adjusting to the personnel that he has. Obviously, when you're in the game, you're going to have to make adjustments when things aren't going well. So that's on him. But to your point about Jalen Hurts, he clearly did not play a good game and clearly showed some of those signs of concern that you have with a guy coming out of college and then only starting a few games where you're not staying in the pocket, you're not letting the routes develop, you're looking to, flee at the first sign of danger. The offensive line wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It's not like he was under heavy pressure and heavy duress all game. But his ball placement and accuracy was also an issue. I mean, it goes unnoticed, but there was a wheel route to Kenny Gainwell that he threw a little bit behind him. But if that's where a wheel route should be, over to the outside shoulder, then that's a big gain. And there were about, a dozen passes like that he missed that he needs to put on his receivers.
It's also interesting because, what I did for the game, Geoff, I mentioned this before, I watched the regular broadcast, then I rewatched it on the Manning cast. And on the Manning cast, they both brought up some of the things that was mentioned on You Guys with the Pod, which was Hurts' footwork was off at times. He missed some throws, but they also mentioned, for example, the touchdown throw to Greg Ward. They thought that was an amazing throw, an amazing play by him. They also mentioned on the interception on the throw to Rager that Rager failed to fight for the ball on the interception, and Peyton was freaking out about how Rager failed his quarterback. So it's like, there's a part of me that wonders, like, for the people out there who are screaming, because we all seen them online, right? Hurts doesn't have the it factor. Hurts stinks. I actually heard someone literally told me yesterday, Geoff, they should have never traded Carson Wentz, right? Like that's where people are right now with Hurts. And there's a part of me that's saying, guys, do we not forget that Peyton Manning led the league in interceptions as a rookie? Like, can we at least see if Hurts is bad for 2 straight weeks before we try to sell him down the river?
I find it interesting that some people who were so strong in their convictions 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago that the Eagles were going to be a much better team than people said, that they were going to challenge to win the division, and were strong in those convictions, are now equally strong in their convictions on the opposite end. Now they think the Eagles stink. Now they think Jalen Hurts stinks. And I would say, well, why didn't you learn from your lesson from 3 weeks ago about being so strong in your convictions on one way? You're just the same way now, just on the other side of the argument. I wrote a column today on Inside the Birds, Josh, where I kind of InsideTheBirds.com, where I reflected a little bit on Chip Kelly's first season. I know nobody wants to talk about Chip Kelly, but do you remember how much of a genius he was after that first game? That's what people still talk about in Chip Kelly's first year, that first game against Washington, to the point where people kind of forget that he lost his next 3 games and was outscored by about 50 points, including a 55-20 loss to the Broncos. I saw it in person. It was ugly. They were 1-3, and everybody thought Chip Kelly was a terrible coach who had no scheme and was going to be a failure. So they won the division that year, right? They went 10-6, so they rebounded. And on the flip side, in 2016, Doug Peterson, as you remember, goes 3-0. I mean, they start off the season with wins over the Browns, the Bears, and then they kill the Steelers 34-3. And what do I remember about the conversation in the city that year? Oh my God, we have to recalibrate. This team is so much better than we think. They're going to win the division. They're going to go far in the playoffs. Carson Wentz is going to be great. What do? They lose week 4 to Detroit, and then they go through a 5-game losing streak in the middle of the year, and they have to fight and claw just to get a 7-win season. So my point of that, and piggybacking off what you said about Jalen Hurts, is that trying to judge a team or a player by its or his highest point or lowest point in September is just flat out dumb. I'm not saying the Eagles are going to be a lot better than they looked on Monday. They could be. They could also be worse. I don't know. That's the point, is that this is supposed to be a transition year where you wait and see what the team is. If you were in the camp that you thought the Eagles were going to win 11 or 12 games, that's on you. Not you, Josh, but I'm saying, like, there was nothing about the Eagles offseason coming off the tumult of last year that said that this team was going to be really, really good and not have growing pains. So now they're having growing pains, and that's to be expected. And if you didn't expect that, to me, that's on you, the fan or the media member or wherever, instead of having a realistic approach to this thing.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, at Geoff Mosher NFL on Twitter. The latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning. Tomorrow will be Q&A, and then Friday, Geoff and Adam will preview Sunday's game. And, of course, check out InsideTheBirds.com for, as Geoff mentioned, his latest he wrote over there on the website. Geoff, I want to flip to the other thing that Sirianni said to the media today that was very eye-opening to me, because I wrote earlier this week, I said there were 3 people to blame for the Eagles game yesterday. I said it was Sirianni, Gannon, and Lurie. Those were my big 3. And then today, when Sirianni was asked by the media, prompted, as you mentioned earlier, he's being prompted with these questions about Jeffrey Lurie. He's like, oh, we talk throughout the week. He's at practice almost every day. That was a little eye-opening, because now there's a part of me that wonders if what is going on the field, how much that is being influenced by the owner, who, remember, emotional intelligence. I want to be 5 years ahead of being 5 years ahead. I want offensive innovation. You know, how much are we maybe concerned that maybe Jeffrey Lurie now is even more involved than we even thought before in this young coach's working situation?
Well, nothing over the last 3 weeks or what Nick Sirianni said today has concerned me any more than I may have been concerned in the offseason of the many things that Adam and Kaplan and I were reporting about Jeffrey Lurie's influence on this team. I don't think anything's changed, because I've seen Jeffrey Lurie at practice not only this year, but several times, and I've been covering the team for a while. I mean, it's not uncommon to see Jeffrey Lurie on the sidelines at practice. So that's not a change or a deviation in what he's done. It's not something because Nick Sirianni is now coaching and he gets the chance to be like, the Mr. Burns puppet there. It's just who Jeffrey Lurie is, and he's got a heavy hand in what goes on with the team. So that part of it is normal. The bigger picture part is, yes, that he does have that kind of an involvement with this team. And I think we've detailed on Inside the Birds before what that has meant for this team's daily operations, its draft picks, its culture inside the building, and some people will tell you that it's not, there are many people who tell you he's a great owner and because he does X, Y, and Z. It's kind of like the Howie thing. People will tell you Howie's a great GM because he does X, Y, and Z really well. And then they'll tell you the same thing with Jeffrey, that, yeah, maybe he's got some flaws. Maybe he's a little heavy-handed here, or maybe, he's going down a road that he shouldn't have gone, that he wouldn't have done 10 years ago. But this is the reality of the situation and the Eagles, and it's stuff that Adam and I have detailed pretty routinely on Inside the Birds. And unfortunately for everybody else, there's no changing that. He's the owner. The owner doesn't fire the owner.
No, he doesn't. But someone asked the question earlier, and I'll portray it to you. And I don't think we actually have an answer to this question, but I figured I'd ask you. Someone texted in the show earlier and said, did Lurie hire Sirianni because he looks around the league and sees McVay and LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan and Cliff Kingsbury and says, I want my young guy?
It's a great question. Jeffrey hasn't spoken a whole lot at length since hiring Nick Sirianni. I do believe Jeffrey prides himself on trying to find that diamond in the rough, that Andy Reid that he was able to mine from when nobody thought about anything about Andy. He went the bigger name route with Chip Kelly and it didn't work. Not that has dissuaded him from the process. I think if Lincoln Riley were interested in taking the Eagles job, he'd be the head coach by now. But that didn't work out in the offseason. So I do think Jeffrey has a different set of criteria, like something only that's internal, of feel and a vibe on his head coaching candidates that is probably unique to him and that you wouldn't find in a lot of other owners. I don't know that he hired Nick Sirianni thinking this is my puppet, but I do think that, I imagine, just knowing Jeffrey, that he thought he was getting someone who was innovative, ahead of the time. And I would pay right now a lot of money to wonder what Jeffrey Lurie is thinking when Nick Sirianni is sitting in front of the press with a microphone saying, we don't really run motion just to run motion. We only do it if there's a distinct advantage to it. While, almost, you got 60% of the league now doing motion literally just for the sake of throwing some eye candy at the defense. And the data is showing that it actually works when you do that.
Geoff Mosher joining us here, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast at Geoff Mosher NFL on Twitter. Geoff, let's get to some of the stuff on the field. Sua Opeta promoted to the active roster today, with Seumalo going down. Sirianni was non-committal to who is potentially starting at the guard positions. So, how do you think Opeta factors into that decision for this Sunday's game?
Well, they need depth, Josh. I mean, they've got, I would assume that Nate Herbig is going to fill a spot. He's either going to play right guard and they're going to move Dickerson to left guard, or they're going to say, we just put Dickerson at right guard. We don't want to mess around with him too much. We'll play Herbig at left guard in place of Seumalo. We'll see. But you have to understand, Brandon Brooks is expected to come back. And when Brandon Brooks is coming back, he's going to play right guard. And so that's going to eventually move Landon Dickerson to left guard anyway. So either you get ahead of the process now, or you kind of just prolong the inevitable and play Herbig there for now. But they have no depth. I mean, you're thinking, first of all, with Mailata hurt, and we have to see if he'll play, you're down to Brett Toth as your top offensive tackle, your swing tackle, which is a little scary. And then on the interior, you've got if Herbig's going to start, then you're really down to Sua Opeta now as one of your top backup interior linemen, along with the kid that they signed from Buffalo's practice squad, Jack Anderson. But I don't know how eager they are to get Jack Anderson out there when he hasn't really practiced for more than a week in this scheme. So Sua Opeta has practiced on this team and knows the personnel around him. And so he becomes more of a valuable piece of depth. But the bottom line is you're not in a great situation if Sua Opeta or Jack Anderson or Brett Toth have to get onto the field against the Chiefs on Sunday.
I'm starting to wonder, Geoff, Dickerson, he was so highly lauded coming out of college. Even guys like Brian Baldinger has literally said he thought Dickerson was the best offensive lineman in the draft. Now, Baldy's also the guy who thought 2 years ago that Mailata was going to be a beast left tackle. So, Baldy, aside from playing in the NFL, knows something about offensive linemen. But there's a part of me that wonders, maybe Dickerson isn't best suited for right guard because, you saw the way he got sideswiped a couple times by the pass rush. Maybe there is something said with the fact that a guy who played center for that many years, now he's moving the guard. Maybe he does have a better plant foot, or maybe he does have a better angle that he takes. And maybe it would make sense to just say, hey, Landon, go learn left guard because we know for sure Seumalo is done for the year.
I mean, the bigger question, you might be right, but the bigger question, Josh, I have is that interesting. By the way, Rodney McLeod, full practice today for the Eagles. So that is a really good thing for them.
That's huge.
Because, that's huge. So that sounds like he's very close to being able to play. To your Dickerson point, and by the way, Dickerson was limited today with a hip. I think in general, it's less about where he's playing and more about did they rush him on the field too quickly? I mean, he did not practice on full, like have a real full practice until after the final cutdown date when he was activated onto the 53. And then he started practicing in full. And this is a guy who suffered that injury. I think the SEC championship game was this year, correct? It was in January.
Yes.
Was it not? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. Rodney McLeod tore his ACL in the winter last year, and he's just now practicing this week for the first time in full. And Dickerson's already played in 2 games. To me, it sort of looks like he's rusty, and it doesn't help that they're passing the ball 80% of the time. So instead of doing what he does best, which is road grade, he's sitting there taking vertical set after vertical set after vertical set. And you do that enough and you're a rookie and you're seeing things for the first time at the NFL level and you haven't really practiced like the rest of your teammates have all since the start of training camp, I think it's reasonable to expect you're going to be a little bit rusty. And I just wonder if maybe the smarter decision would have been to go with Herbig off the bat until Dickerson had his legs underneath him more.
Geoff, one more for you if I let you go. One of the guys you guys mentioned also in the podcast this morning, speaking of the offensive line, Jack Driscoll. Now, obviously, his practice window has been activated. Doesn't mean he's going to play this week or anytime soon, but whenever he is activated, I'm assuming, because I believe he's their best backup offensive lineman. So whatever his role is, that maybe something to keep in mind as well. Is he something that the audience needs to say, hey, when Driscoll is active, does he maybe start getting into the starting lineup instead of any of the guys we mentioned, Herbig, Dickerson, Opeta?
Yeah, I would think, just based on how I know Jeff Stoutland feels about Jack Driscoll, and you saw last year he started right tackle in the season opener when Lane Johnson couldn't go as a rookie. They like Jack Driscoll a lot. They felt year one he was better suited to play right tackle. They felt that in order to play interior, he has the athleticism to be a good interior guard who can pull and trap and do all sorts of athletic things, but they wanted him to put on the weight and the muscle to be able to kind of grind with the big bodies there at defensive tackle, which he did this offseason. Of course, he got hurt there with the pec, but I believe that if he were completely fully healthy, he might have been in before Landon Dickerson, but he would definitely be in before Nate Herbig would be. So they really need him back. They need the depth, and it's better for them, in my opinion. We'll see. I mean, there's not, like Jack Driscoll's a young player too, but I think it's better for them to have Driscoll filling in for Sayamalu and Herbig as that top backup interior offensive lineman, then vice versa.
He's Geoff Mosher. Follow him on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL, InsideTheBirds.com. Subscribe the Inside the Birds podcast. The latest on the film study on today's podcast. Tomorrow, Quentin Michael, Jason Avant. And then Friday on the pod, Adam and Jeff get more into the preview of this Sunday's game versus the Chiefs. Jeff will be back on Monday to recap the game with Mike Gill. Adam Kaplan on tomorrow's edition of Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Jeff, great stuff today. We'll catch up soon.
All right, Josh. Have a great one.
Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN and Football at 4 is being brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group at Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long at the Wild Wild West, Tropicana, and Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Still to come on the show, Jason Fitz. He had to reschedule. He joined us coming up at 4:40 p.m. He's in a different time zone, apparently, I found out. So he will join us a little bit later in the show. Plus, Dave Weinberg is going to bump up a little bit earlier in the show because Mike Gill had to go to the LPGA Pro-Am today. I got you covered today on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. So a Weinberg Wednesday will be at 5:25 instead of at 6:20 today. So Weinberg moves up. Fitz moves down. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. We got more of your messages to get to on the other side. Great insights there from Geoff Mosher. We'll break down more of the Eagles injury report that came out. Rodney McLeod, full participant. Davion Taylor, full participant. Who are the limited guys? Well, you heard about Landon Dickerson. I'll tell you the rest of the names on the other side. Josh Hennick here on the Sports Bash. You're on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
Perfect.
4 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN is being brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or by downloading the PropSwap app today. We'll get to more of your messages in just a bit. We got messages from, I got Jay in Dennisville. I got Glenn in EHT. I got also Jalen over on the stream. But first, we got to get you the news. I told you guys earlier I wanted to give you the full injury report. So the full Eagles injury report for today, Rodney McLeod, Davion Taylor, both full participant. Remember, Rodney McLeod was not going to play until he was a full participant at practice because of his injury situation. So you'll lose Kayvon Wallace, but if you can get McLeod back, that is a huge guy to have back in the secondary, not just for this week, but for the rest of the season. If Rodney can be, 85, 90% of what he is the rest of the year, that is a huge get for this team the rest of the year. The limited participation, Jason Kelsey with a foot/rest designation, not too concerning. Lane Johnson, ankle, little concerning because remember, he had to have multiple ankle surgeries in the last 14 months. So is that the ankle he had surgery on? Is that on the other ankle? Just something to keep an eye on. Marcus Epps, as expected, he's out with a limited participation with a shoulder issue. He did get a little banged up in that game Monday night, but he played through it. And then Dickerson limited with a hip issue. And then Mailata, DNP, did not participate in practice with the knee, the MCL sprain. So some offensive linemen to keep an eye on. But the good news is McLeod is back. Let's get to your messages. Of course, we prioritize the messages from the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. Jay in Dennisville chimes in and says, I feel like after we won the Super Bowl, Laurie didn't know how to handle success, and he thinks he knows best now and dabbling with the football side more. Jay, it's interesting because, guys who cover the team intimately, like, Adam Kaplan and Geoff Mosher and others, they've detailed in the past that Laurie has always been involved. But I think the difference is what you said. It's part of it was the Super Bowl. It was Laurie finally fulfilled his promise when he bought the team in the 90s. He was going to bring a Super Bowl championship to Philadelphia. And there's a part of him that got a little intoxicated with that feeling, that euphoria, that situation. But I still hold to the fact that I believe the Chip Kelly situation changed Laurie a little bit too. Okay. I think, Laurie is a guy who, when he saw everything crash and burn at the end of the Chip Kelly era, the way it did, and the way everything went down for those final 12 months, I think there's a part of him that's, I don't want to say afraid, but maybe he's concerned that he doesn't want things to go that bad ever again. So, Jay, I think that it's a twofold thing to me. I feel like the first level was the Chip Kelly situation, and the second level was Super Bowl championship. But then the third part is what Jeff Mosher just mentioned about 10 minutes ago. Well, actually 15 minutes ago, was that Laurie looks at Andy Reid and says, I found this guy. I found the guy that nobody else found. And I found Doug Peterson. He won us the Super Bowl. And Andy Reid made us a perennial contender. I found these guys. I know what I'm looking for in coaches. And Laurie has kind of said that himself as well. In the past, he has mentioned that, he has a track record when it comes to hiring coaches. So, it's something to keep an eye on. It's something to keep in mind. By the way, the Eagles practice squad protections have come out. Coyote Wasika, the tackle/guard, was protected. John Hightower, Jordan Howard, Elijah Riley. So Awasika, that's a guy who they definitely need for depth purposes. I think they're definitely still concerned about the depth of this team. Hightower's interesting to be protected because I don't know if he's even going to play this year unless someone gets injured. Jordan Howard, do they call him up on game day? He hasn't been called up yet. Does Sirianni saying that he get back to the run game, does that mean Howard gets on the field this week? Something to keep an eye on. And then Elijah Riley, he's definitely a guy that has to be considered, considering the fact that Epps is limited at practice. Wallace is done for the next several weeks. Does Riley get a call up for game day, considering that right now going into game day, you have McLeod coming off an injury. Epps is a little banged up. And then you only have Anthony Harris, and then the emergency guys, Avonte Maddox and Andre Sacheret. He's mostly a special teams guy at this point. So some names to keep an eye on there. Glenn from EHT chimes in on the text board at 609-403-0973, questioning something I said earlier. He says, I don't see how you, Josh, could have more confidence in an inexperienced coaching staff in Philly than an experienced coaching staff and head coach who has a high level of success in the past in this league. Washington has issues at quarterback for sure, but I can see Rivera rallying the troops to make this team competitive as the season goes on more than Sirianni. Glenn, you have every right to feel that way. I just feel like with Washington, there's a part of me that wonders how much of what happened last year was the guys getting up for Rivera because he was fighting cancer, and how much of it was having a first-year coordinator. Jack Del Rio has a long history. Everywhere Del Rio has gone, that first year he's on the job with a defense, they get better. The second year, they plateau a bit. So the part of me that wonders, did the team get up for Rivera last year? Did Del Rio's message get a little stale, right? Is Turner the offensive coordinator? Has he maybe been figured out a little bit by the league? I understand that you feel like Rivera, if anybody could find the button to push, it's Ron down in Washington. But to me, Glenn, I just look at Philadelphia and I say that I don't think the league has figured out Philadelphia yet. I think Philadelphia being an abomination in terms of mental errors and all kinds of problems, I think Philadelphia, if they stop shooting themselves in the foot, could turn it around faster than hoping that Rivera can rally the troops for the rest of the season. I'm not saying it can't happen, Glenn, and I appreciate your question there, but I do think there's something to be said for that. All right, we'll get to more of your messages a little bit later. Jason Fitz, ESPN radio host, will join us on the other side right here on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Wednesday edition of the Bash. 4 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how at PropSwap.com or by downloading the PropSwap app today. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on your Wednesday edition of the Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Joining us right now, you won't hear him tonight on Spain and Fitz, but he's usually every Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Spain and Fitz. The co-host, Jason Fitz, joins us right now here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Jason, how you doing today?
Man, I'm spectacular. You're getting all the work, and Gil's out there playing golf. Like, I think you got the short end of the stick, brother.
Oh, did I get the short end of the stick? I don't know. Well, maybe I did because it's a really nice day outside. But what I need to really know from you is where's Waldo? Where is Jason Fitz today? What is Jason Fitz doing today?
Well, today is a rare day where I, frankly, don't have anything to do. So I ran back to Nashville for a day, and I'm getting everything ready for Halloween because everybody knows I'm a massive Halloween fan, and we like to set up Halloween scenes in our front lawn, and then have the community come out, and they can come out all the time. And my friends get dressed up in costumes and scare people, and we raise money for the Humane Society. So I took a day to come down to Nashville and set up animatronic things that will scare children for the next 6 weeks.
Oh, that's beautiful. Your commitment to holidays is something that I wish more people took pride in, but I digress. Jason, this week is a weird week for Philadelphia sports, and I want to get your perspective as someone who covers things nationally, because here in Philadelphia, it's a weird situation. The Eagles get embarrassed on Monday Night Football. The Phillies are pathetic because they can barely score in Atlanta last night, and their playoff dreams are just going down the drain very quick. And then you have this situation with Ben Simmons looming over the Sixers, kind of like the Watcher does in the What If Marvel show on Disney+. So which of those three stands out to you the most?
Well, I think the Ben Simmons situation isn't going to change anytime soon. The Phillies meltdown is one of the undertold portions of the late season drama that we have across Major League Baseball. But I still think that the Eagles, and the fact that we're trying to figure out who Jalen Hurts is, what that coaching staff looks like, how good that team can be. I mean, the fact is that the Giants look like hot garbage that are about to be completely reset as an organization. The Washington football team has been an absolute disappointment to me so far this year. I really like the Cowboys, but if you're the Eagles, you got to look at it and say, man, if we can get things to gel quickly, maybe we could make some noise. And then you get just lambasted on Monday Night Football. It was an embarrassing loss and a difficult loss. You're going to see some of that. I still believe Jalen Hurts deserves every opportunity to prove himself, and I'm not going to take some huge takeaway from it. But to see the Eagles get beat that way by the Cowboys, who I think are good but not that good, I think has to be a kick in the no-no places to Eagles fans as a reminder that this season is going to be a little bit of that, a little up and a little down.
Nick Sirianni is taking credit for the Eagles' loss on Monday night. Jalen Hurts is taking credit for the Eagles' loss on Monday night. Where does Jason Fitz, though, lean toward responsibility? Do you put responsibility on the coach who's putting out the game plan? Do you put responsibility on the quarterback who made some bad throws? Or should they take even responsibility for the loss on Monday night?
I think there's a little bit of this that has to go to Jalen Hurts, because as the quarterback, we all know when you go to the line of scrimmage in most offenses, you have 3 or 4 opportunities to change the play, and I don't think they did an effective job of that throughout the course of the game. And then, as you mentioned, some throws. I know we could talk about the slip on the one route, but I still think that would have been picked either way. I mean, it was just a bad throw. So you've got this combination of I'm not sure that they're really Hurts is using the full mental capacity that he has for somebody that I think is a really smart quarterback. And then didn't throw the ball well enough in the plays that they had called for him. So I think that a lot of this lies at the feet of the quarterback. I mean, a really good quarterback, and I'm not saying Hurts is there yet, but a really good quarterback can save you from a bad game plan. So right now what you have is a coach that can't save a quarterback and a quarterback that can't save a coach. And we've got to figure out who's going to step up first in that equation.
You mentioned your faith and belief in Jalen Hurts. There are some people, they're already starting to bail on the guy. They say he doesn't have the it factor. They say he can't throw a deep ball, even though they forget 2 weeks ago he threw a gorgeous pass to Quez Watkins. But I keep going back to, Jason, those of us who are old enough to remember, Peyton Manning led the NFL in interceptions his rookie year. Eli Manning looked like hot garbage his first year with the Giants, but yet both of them won championships. So how can we explain to people that they need to be patient with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it comes down to the ability to start to process faster. Like, one of the reasons I wasn't sure about Kyler Murray coming into the league, and boy, was I wrong. But, if you watch Kyler Murray back at Oklahoma, he ran around until somebody came open and then beautifully flung him the football. So my question was, what's going to happen in the NFL when he doesn't have as much time to run around? Now he's figured that out, and it's been a delight to watch. We all know that. But realistically, what you've got to see from young quarterbacks is how quickly can they get through their progressions, make a decision on what to do with the football, and get rid of it. And at the NFL level, we all know this. You've got less time to process things. You better be able to do it right, do it quickly, which means you got to be smarter when you get to the line of scrimmage. You got to be quicker to dissect what they're doing. You got to process everything quickly. And what we're seeing right now is that there are times that Jalen Hurts does that, and then there are times that he doesn't. When he's holding on to the ball, you got to ask yourself, watch it back, like watch the all 22 back on it too. Like, is he holding on to the ball because he's waiting for somebody to come open, because he doesn't know where to go with the football? Like, each of those is different. And what you've got to see from young quarterbacks getting reps, and I know it's not Jalen's first year, but it is by start count. It's essentially his first experience on the field. Every week is he taking a step forward, because defensive coordinators are far ahead of young quarterbacks when it comes to adjusting their game plan. So now he's got to process faster to make it tougher to coach against him. And if you see that throughout the course of the year, there's hope. And we saw that at times in his college career. I believe he can do it, but not everybody does that at the same progression speed in the early portion of their careers.
How much also needs to be considered the fact that the Eagles potentially have 3 first-round picks, but in this year's draft, there's a lot of questions about these quarterbacks, Jason. You watch college football. Keaton Slovis is an untenable situation with USC. Sam Howell has not looked great. Spencer Rattler, I don't know what the heck's going on with him half the time. The quarterback class coming out this year is not looking that great. So does that make a team like Philadelphia that is still figuring out their quarterback situation maybe have to pump the brakes a little bit on maybe moving on from a guy after this year?
Yeah, 1,000. That's a great point by you, and you're 1,000% right. Let's add on to that the fact that the 22 quarterbacks selected in the first round from 2009 to 2016, none of the 22 are still with their team. And then look at what we've seen this year. You have one rookie quarterback with the win so far, and that's Mac Jones over Zach Wilson, another rookie quarterback, 10 touchdowns to 18 picks. I mean, rookie quarterbacks this year in what was supposed to be a vaunted class have not played well. Trevor Lawrence looks like he has no idea what he's doing, and he was about the surest pick any of us could imagine coming into the draft, right? So this thought process that you get a rookie quarterback and everything's going to be saved is just flat out false. And you're absolutely right. Like, we have no idea who Keaton's going to be. I'd add Sam Howell out of North Carolina as the list of somebody that one week looks like he's going to be a star in the NFL. The next week looks like he needs 2 years of additional reps in college football. Spencer Rattler has taken a step back, and I think we can really question Lincoln Riley and the work he's done with him. So, I don't look at any of these kids and say, oh, my God, there's your guy. And even if you find your guy, I mean, if you're the Bears and you think you lucked into, I believe, the second best quarterback in this year's draft, Justin Fields, it still didn't look pretty last week, did it? So, there's a long-term sort of this moment of we just need to get a quarterback in the draft. What you're really saying is we need to press the restart button and acknowledge that for the next 3 years, we might not be good while we figure out year one, if we've got the guy year two, is he still the guy in year three? Who's he normalized to be? Look at Baker Mayfield. So I think the thought process to go into the draft for an answer is worst case scenario for most franchises. And I think fans get that twisted when their teams stink.
Also, you don't want to fall in love with the quarterback like David Gettleman did. Just saying. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill, talking with Jason Fitz, ESPN radio host, Spain and Fitz, Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. You also can follow him on Twitter at Jason Fitz with a strong profile picture on the avatar there. Jason, you also cover college football, and I got to ask you about the college football. There's a lot of parity. There's a lot of people wondering, why is there so much parity? And I keep falling back to, did you all forget how many guys didn't go into the draft? And did you all forget how much this transfer portal is changing things? To me, Jason, I think the combination of those two forces colliding right now is creating a lot of these competitive games and these upsets.
Yeah, you're so right. And I'll use a great example in my mind on that is Michigan State. Like, Michigan State hired Mel Tucker right before last season, didn't really have time to recruit, didn't bring in anybody, came into this year, didn't really recruit well. And we all said, my God, Sparty's going to be just awful and dormant. Well, when they realized they weren't able to recruit the way they wanted to, they worked hard on the transfer portal, and they brought in 3 or 4 guys that became immediate impact starters for them. And now not only are they a top 20 team, but they look really good more often than not. Like, Michigan State looks far better than anybody expected because the transfer portal gives them the opportunity to do that. I think what we're seeing across the board is, you're right, returning players, but also just the ability to go in and rework yourself. There's just not a big difference. Like, you can tell me that Alabama and Georgia are 1 and 2. I would say Oregon belongs in that conversation also. But when it comes to the fourth best team in college football, you can make a compelling argument for about 6 different teams to be that team. And by the time we hit the end of the regular season, I wouldn't be surprised to literally see everybody have a loss. And if that's the case, that's best case scenario for college football. Like, the complaint is that it's always predictable. Well, we've got Clemson with 2 losses. Ohio State's going to end up taking a second or third loss before this is all said and done. I don't really trust Penn State or Iowa to go undefeated through all of this. So I'm looking at it saying Oklahoma has their flaws. I think it's a really fun year to cover college football because other than Alabama, we have no idea if we should put all our money on any one of these teams to run the table.
One of the games we're airing this Saturday on 97.3 ESPN is that Notre Dame versus Cincinnati game. That game is huge, not just because Marcus Freeman's on the other sideline now, but because of the fact that the winner of that game may very well put themselves in the driver's seat for the college football playoff.
Yeah, and Cincinnati better hope Notre Dame starts passing the eye test because, Cincinnati really banked. A lot of the people were saying if Cincinnati went undefeated this year, could they get into the college football playoff? And while the blanket answer to that was yes, it lacked a little context. Part of the reason the answer is yes is because we're all used to seeing Cincinnati be good. And this was a year where they were taking on Indiana and Notre Dame. That gives you the chance for 2 high-profile wins. The problem is Indiana's not very good this year. So what looked like it could be a high-profile win now is just sort of a middle-of-the-pack win. I don't think the committee is going to really treat that game with a ton of respect. So now what version of Notre Dame do they get? Like, if they take on Notre Dame, beat Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame turns out throughout the course of the year to look like we thought Notre Dame could look, like Notre Dame looked in the fourth quarter against Wisconsin, not the first 3. Now all of a sudden Cincinnati gets that key resume win that matters so much to the committee. And in a year, like I said, where I could see everybody taking losses, that's the clear path that gets Group of 5 into the college football playoff, which I'd be all for. I mean, I think that Cincinnati's got as good a chance as anybody of getting into the playoff at this point if they're capable of running the table. They need to have a really clean eye test win over Notre Dame, though, and have Notre Dame continue to play well the rest of the season. That's a lot to ask.
Jason, one more before I let you go. Appreciate you jumping on a later time here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Arkansas is now 18-3 against the spread, and they have 5 outright winners as underdogs under Sam Pittman. How good is Arkansas?
They are really stinking good. And the line on this game shocked me. Like, it is rare that I come in and really say, oh my God, hammer the over, hammer the under, whatever. I'm looking at this and saying, why in God's green earth is anybody making Arkansas that kind of dog? Now, I get Georgia's defense is special to watch, and I'm not taking anything away from it. Arkansas's quarterback got beat up a little bit last week, so maybe he's not 100%. But this Arkansas defense flies around, and this Georgia offense has had their questionable moments. I'm not counting Vandy. They're barely a football program. So I'm looking at a questionable Georgia offense against a questionable Arkansas offense. I can't find the points to be scored to give us that kind of point spread. So I think Arkansas is getting real disrespect in this matchup. I think ultimately they lose, but I feel like they definitely cover.
He's Jason Fitz. Follow him on Twitter at Jason Fitz. You can catch him Monday through Friday night, except for tonight because we're the Phillies Braves, but Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Spain and Fitz co-host. And of course, he's all over the digital. He's all over ESPN. You can't get away from him. He's Jason Fitz. He joins us each week here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Jason, appreciate you recalibrating and jumping on later in the show.
I appreciate your time, my friend. Have a great week.
Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, this hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or by downloading the PropSwap app today. Still to come on the show, Dave Weinberg joins us coming up for a Weinberg Wednesday. He's bumping up from his usual 6:20 time on game night to 5:25 tonight to talk more about the Eagles and what's going on with this team and this organization. Of course, Dave has covered the team for over 27 years, so he'll give us some more insights and his perspective on the organization as well, coming off that embarrassing Monday night loss. And more of your messages. I got messages on the 97.3 app. I got texts. I got YouTube messages. We'll get to all of you guys on the other side. Josh Hennig filling for Mike Gill on a Hump Day Wednesday on 97.3 ESPN FM.
South Jersey's home of the Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, me too.
WENJ, WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City, a town square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is 97.3 ESPN.
Josh Henning filling in for Mike Gill, Hump Day Wednesday edition on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. We got more messages to get to. All of you guys have been chiming in throughout the show. I will get to all your messages in just a bit. Still to come on the show, Dave Weinberg joins us for a Weinberg Wednesday, joins us an hour earlier on 97.3 ESPN. He was at the LPGA Pro-Am today. That's why Mike Gill was unable to come in today. He was out there. Listen, it's a great contest last week, and somebody had a wonderful, awesome day. There's beautiful weather outside, and they spent the day golfing with Mike Gill, Pete Thompson, and an LPGA Pro. And you know how they won that contest? Because they downloaded the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. They jumped right on there. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. They followed the instructions on the app. And guess what? They got to play golf with the PT, the MG, and LPGA Pro today, all because they had the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's more than just getting the latest news on Eagles, Phillies, Sixers, Flyers, high school sports, or listening to all the shows like the Sports Bash, Mike Gill, or Game Night with Josh Hennig. No, it's also an opportunity for you to direct message the show, priority messaging through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. And you can even win contests because of the app. Eagles been a big topic throughout the show. Obviously, with listen, the loss the other day was still aching on a lot of us, right? And we got a lot of messages to get to here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. Don't forget that the Sports Bash is being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia, they want to get you approved today. Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. For those who didn't hear it earlier, the Eagles came out with their injury report. It's a very interesting twist of information because now Isaac Seumalo is done for the year because of the Liz Frank injury. And now we know that Rodney McLeod, he is currently on track to play this week. He was a full participant at practice. So big news for the Eagles, who will also be without Kevon Wallace for 6 to 8 weeks due to his shoulder separation injury from the Cowboys game. On top of all of that, the Eagles called up Sua Opeta to the active roster to fill the void of no Isaac Seumalo moving forward. But something to keep an eye on. Who was limited at practice? Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson. Now, they did practice. They were on the field. But Dickerson with a hip, Lane Johnson with an ankle. And as I told you guys an hour ago, that ankle designation concerns me a little bit because there's not a slash rest next to it. It's not like Jason Kelsey where it's foot slash rest. Or last week it was Fletcher Cox who was illness slash rest. When they had that backslash and rest, it's a designation that, listen, we're just giving the guys some extra time to rest. It's not that serious. But there's no backslash rest next to the Lane Johnson ankle thing. So I'm a little concerned because is that the ankle he's had multiple surgeries on? Is that the other ankle? Okay, these are things to keep an eye on moving forward. And Dickerson, I mean, the dude just came off of ripping up his knee. Now he's got a hip issue. Like, is it just a simple hip pointer and they're just trying to be cautious with him? Is it maybe more serious? I mean, I certainly hope not. So Eagles injury report, some things to keep an eye on as we get closer to Eagles versus Chiefs. Of course, you can get all the action this Sunday. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick on the call here on your home for Eagles football in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we got you covered all Sunday. Billy Schwein in the locker room with Pete Thompson at 10 a.m. And then, of course, the Eagles Radio Network takes over. And we got your football triple header this Sunday on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, that triple header, if I had the right page in front of me, there it is. Of course, you get the Eagles versus Chiefs at 1 o'clock. And, of course, Sunday football is Tampa versus New England. Yes, Tampa versus New England. Brady returns to New England. After 20 years on the same sidelines, Brady and Belichick will meet this weekend as opponents, and you can be part of the epic showdown with the unbelievable odds on FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can win $125 on a $5 bet if the Patriots or Buccaneers score a touchdown. That's right, 25-1 odds on any touchdown anytime during the Tampa New England game. Offers like this are just one of the many reasons I love betting football on FanDuel Sportsbook, because their app is simple to use with unique fun bet types like same-game parlays and always-on promotions to let you get more action out of every game day. FanDuel is sports betting made simple, and they're always hooking you up with great offers. Sign up with FanDuel Sportsbook today using promo code HENNIG and make your first bet on one of the history books. Biggest games, Brady facing off with the Patriots. Don't forget to use promo code HENNIG when you sign up with FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older to play and present in New Jersey. New users only. $10 first deposit required. Must wager in designated offer market. Max bonus $125. Restrictions apply. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Get to your messages here. As promised, of course, you can DM the show, priority messaging, thanks to 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City. We also are live on YouTube and Twitter at 973 ESPN, and the text board is open, 609-403-0973. Earlier on the text board, Tom from Summers Point says, doesn't help when the Eagles have a terrible quarterback. That's from Tom in Summers Point. And listen, Tom, you can hate on Hurts all you want, okay? The reality is that he's not terrible, okay? If Hurts was terrible, first of all, he wouldn't be starting for the Eagles. That would be Flacco or Minshew. Second of all, here's the problem. You're going to hold one game against a guy. One game. This is the problem with sports at times. We take one game and use it as a referendum on people. To me, that's insane. You can't take one game and say the guy is horrible, he stinks, okay? Unless it's Nate Peterman and you throw 5 interceptions in one game. And they were all just horrible, insanely bad interceptions. Jalen Hurts is not terrible. Okay? You would have thought Peyton Manning was terrible after his first year in the league. You would have thought that Eli Manning would have never won a Super Bowl after his first year with the Giants. You would have thought that Kurt Warner was a loser because he couldn't make an NFL team for years before he accidentally got the Rams starting job when Trent Green went down. Remember, everyone laughed Dick Vermeil out of the building. Kurt Warner's our quarterback. People are like, Kurt Warner? Who the heck is Kurt Warner? There is a long history of scenarios where quarterbacks were not great early on in their careers. And then they turned out to be pretty darn good. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is going to be a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying he's going to win multiple championships at the NFL level, but I'm saying we got to be patient with this guy. All right? They just jump on the guy and say he's terrible or he stinks after one game, or you nitpicking a handful of plays over a period of 2 games. Jalen Hurts has more passing yards and a better completion percentage through his first 7 NFL starts than Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson won the league MVP in an offense that was literally catered so he didn't have to throw the ball as much. And he still had a weak completion percentage in an offense that was literally built for him. And Hurts, who has now played in 2 offenses under 2 play callers, has more passing yards and a better completion percentage than a guy who became the league MVP. But I get it. We pick and choose who we like. We live in a world where we pick and choose who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's the hero, who's the villain, before we ever give somebody a chance to prove themselves. More messages coming in here into the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Dan from EHC chimes in and says, is it possible Sirianni could be fired during the season because he's totally getting out coached the last 2 weeks? I don't think he gets fired during the season. I think that this is an example of a coach who has never been a play caller, has never been a head coach, who's learning on the job. I'm not excusing his horrible game planning, his horrible coaching, honestly, the pathetic excuses he's come up with. I mean, when he came on to the media today and said the ridiculous thing of, well, when we run RPOs, even if we don't run the ball, we still consider that a run play. No. You chart the plays as they happen. You don't chart the plays depending on the pre-called concept. You know, coaches like Sirianni, they're so used to talking in coach speak at times, I don't think they even listen to themselves. So, to me, for as bad as Sirianni has been for 2 straight weeks with his game planning and his play calling and his everything that comes to the media as well, I still think there's a chance that he can get better. Listen, Sirianni was horrible the first couple times he talked to the media. He has gotten 10 times better. I have to give him credit. I'm watching the press conference today. He was managing the press conference. Reporters were trying to get their questions in, and he's turning to them and say, hey, so-and-so, I'll get to you in a minute. Give me 1 second. I'll get to so-and-so first. He spent the whole press conference, 13 plus minutes or whatever it was, 13, 14 minutes. And the reporters wanted to get their questions in. And he made the point to say, I acknowledge you have a question. This guy got his question first. I'm going to let him ask the question, and then I'm going to come to you. And he did it to the whole presser. He couldn't do that months ago. He was completely overwhelmed and couldn't manage the situation. So if he can learn how to manage a press conference and be better in front of the media, there's still a possibility he can get better as a play caller and as a head coach. I'm not promising you that, but I'm just saying it's possible. A couple more messages to get to here on 97.3 ESPN. Tom from the Village chimes in at 609-403-0973. Says, I'm agitated at how people were fine with giving Wentz 4 years, but went Hurts out after 7 games. Also, I haven't heard anyone talk about Dak yelling out Bob Ross. The announcer is calling the play, and we still get torched for 10 yards. That's from Tom the Villas. Yeah, that was a weird situation. I said it on my article on 97.3 ESPN.com. I said it yesterday here on 97.3 ESPN. Jonathan Gannon got outcoached. And for those who don't remember, if you go back and watch the game, Dak Prescott as just loudly says, Bob Ross, Bob Ross. And what's the play they run? They run a draw play. I mean, that's the most captain obvious play call. But apparently, nobody on the Eagles defense, nobody on their coaching staff said, hey, they're running a draw play. No, they just stood there like, I don't know what's coming. But back to Tom's original point. You know, the problem is that we live in a world where people are impatient. People don't want quarterbacks to pan out. You know, Peyton Manning has made fun of himself for 3 straight weeks on the Manning cast, how he never threw a spiral. He threw those wobblers. Like he made the wobbling pass, you know, legitimate or popular, or basically making fun of himself. But Peyton's right. Go back and watch his throws. He had some of the ugliest passes in world history. The guy's going to the Hall of Fame. You know, we gave Wentz 4 years. We gave Nick Foles multiple times to come back and start for this team. We gave Michael Vick 2 chances, literally and figuratively, right? We gave Kevin Cobb multiple chances. We gave Donovan McNabb multiple chances to come back from injury. 20 years in this city, we have given quarterbacks who are as good or lesser than Jalen Hurts, some of them are a little better, more and more opportunities. But the fact that people are already ready to bail on Jalen Hurts, it's cheap. It's a soft move because people want to pick and choose what they like or don't like about a guy. When the people say he can't throw the ball deep, you conveniently forget the Quez Watkins ball 2 weeks ago or the Deshaun Jackson bomb he threw last year in Dallas. The people who say he has no arm strength, what are you judging his arm strength compared to? Brett Favre? I mean, come on. You act like name a quarterback who's not Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford, who has this amazing throwing arm right now in the NFL. Jimmy Garoppolo's got a solid throwing arm. It's not elite. Okay? Jared Goff, him and Carson Wentz, well, was one of the concerns. Wentz had a better throwing arm than Goff. Goff got the team to the Super Bowl. Right? Kyler Murray, phenomenal athlete. But some people think that his throws need too much of a windup behind them for him to throw deep. But yet he's considered an MVP candidate right now. Teddy Bridgewater's winning in Denver. He's got probably one of the most average throwing arms in the NFL. So when you say that Hurts has no arm strength, what are you comparing it to? Brett Favre? John Elway? Dan Marino? Again, people want to nitpick. If you are the person who finds negative in everything, I can't help you. Another texture chimes in at 609-403-0973. Jeff from Summers Point says, bring back Doug Peterson as the head coach, Nick Foles as the backup quarterback. That's Jeff from Summers Point. Guess what? The owner didn't want Doug Peterson anymore. The owner wanted a hand-picked guy. He wanted the shiny new toy. He got tired of Doug. The problem for Foles right now is I think Nick Foles is – I think that the Eagles got the most out of him, right? I think we're at a point right now where Nick Foles' 2 tenures in Philadelphia burned the most out of him. And I think we're at a situation now where, you know, Foles is just a guy who is playing out the string in his career. He's going to write some amazing memoir one day. It's going to be an all-time bestseller. He's going to be inducted into the Eagles Hall of Fame, and that's going to be that. Meanwhile, Doug Peterson's going to be a head coach in the league again one day. I don't know where, but he's going to be a head coach. Everyone just better hope it's not with the Giants. Because if they fire Gettleman and Judge at the end of the year, don't be surprised if someone calls Doug Peterson and asks if he wants to coach the Giants. Josh Hennick hanging out with you, filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Call messages coming in on the YouTube stream. Dom chimes in and says, would you put it past Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie to limit the tight end and running back touches because those guys have contracts coming up? It's just baffling that they are the strength of the offense and they're being ignored. I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's a little too conspiratorial because, number one, in order to do that, you have to have a proactive game plan that literally eliminates them from the game plan. If that was the case, then why did you use the running back so much in week 1 and you won, right? You know, yeah, I documented on the website that the Cowboys have more passing targets, Cowboys tight ends, than the Eagles tight ends. But I don't think it's because the front office and the owner is trying to limit their touches to hurt their negotiating contract. I think that's a little too conspiratorial. It's hard to concertedly program a quarterback to, on one hand, go through his option 1, option 2, option 3, get the ball out of your hands, and then simultaneously tell him, don't get the ball to the tight end of the running back. Now, if we saw multiple situations where Miles Sanders, Zach Ertz, and Dallas Goedert are not on the field more often than not, and they went 5 wide receivers, and the only running back there was Gainwell, I could maybe rock with that conspiracy theory. I think it's a little too conspiratorial for me. One more message before we get to the break. Dave Weinberg joins us for a Weinberg Wednesday coming up in about 6 minutes from now. Jalen chimes in and says, reporters, I won't name them, Jalen says, who have been at practice with Hurts much of the year says he has tons of arm strength and that isn't the issue at all. It's more of footwork and timing so far. Well, the Mannings pointed out on the broadcast. Peyton and Eli said that the Jalen's footwork was off for a good portion of the Cowboys game. They felt that he didn't use his footwork right when he threw the interception to Jalen Reagor. He didn't go through his progressions properly when he threw the interception, the digs. So you could argue that, I'm going to trust the opinion of Peyton and Eli Manning on a quarterback's ability to play football than I am anybody else. Okay. Look, I'm not saying Peyton and Eli are right about everything, but I tend to feel like quarterbacks understand quarterbacks. So appreciate all the messages coming in. Josh, I think hanging out with you here on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up next, we'll get more into the Eagles with Dave Weinberg for a Weinberg Wednesday, an hour earlier than usual here on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. We'll get to more of your messages in just a bit as we still got time here on the show. Keep them coming in. Of course, you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, or you can chime in text board, YouTube, whatever your heart may desire. But right now, we're going to take a timeout from your messages. Joining us right now on the video stream, Dave Weinberg joining us an hour earlier than usual, so we appreciate him joining me on a very topsy-turvy day for me. Dave, I know you were out at the LPGA Pro-Am today, and frankly, it's probably a perfect day weather-wise to be out there. So how good was it of a day for you?
Oh, it was fantastic, Josh. We had such a good time. Like you said, beautiful weather. Played with your buddies Mike Gill and Pete Thompson. I can say we hit the ball a lot. I don't know how well we scored okay, but yeah, we played with a former Symetra Tour pro by the name of Jennifer Neville, and she was great company. Very good player. We had a blast, which is what it's all about, really.
Yeah, my LPGA Pro-Am insider says you guys finished around 4 under.
That's correct. Yep, we sure did, and that's pretty good, but it's not going to be good enough to win. I mean, you're going to see somebody like 11 or 12 under, something like that, probably.
Well, considering that aside from the pro, you were probably the best one out there, right?
I think we all hit some good shots.
Okay.
I think we all contributed. I mean, I hit a few, and Pete made some putts. Mike played, and yeah, Mike hit a couple good shots. He was better than I thought he was going to be honest with you.
Well, considering Mike plays like literally once a year, you can't really judge.
Last time he played was 2 years ago.
Right, you can't really judge Mike Gill's golf prowess by the fact that the guy literally plays once a year. So, whereas you and Pete actually get on the golf course much more often. So,
yeah. Well, we everybody contributed. We had a really good time. It was fun.
Well, Dave, not to ruin the mood, but we got to talk about the embarrassment that is the Philadelphia Eagles. Listen, as Mike Gill waves in the background on the video stream, for those watching on YouTube and Twitter, Mike popping in the studio here. Dave, I mentioned it earlier before you came on. I mentioned on the website, to me, I can't get over the fact that your two guys calling plays in that game, Sirianni and Gannon, completely got out coached, completely dropped the ball. And honestly, I feel bad for Eagle fans because you have two guys who are learning on the job, and both of them completely failed on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, they really came up short. I mean, I guess I've been a little kind of hard on Nick Sirianni from the beginning, and unfortunately, he did nothing to sway my opinion of him. He just looked like he was out of his league, quite frankly. I mean, to run the ball 3 times with your running backs, which was almost like a historically low output from your backs, that was just, there was no excuse. The score was not out of hand, despite what he might say. There was plenty of time to establish the run game, if only to give your defense a break. The 3 and outs, 3 incompletions. It's you're taking off like a minute off the clock. That really made no sense. And Jonathan Gannon, I mean, I don't understand why they got gashed on the run so quick. I would think you'd want to move one of your safeties up a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage once it became apparent that Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard were going to be carrying that offense. That really didn't make a whole lot of sense either.
Well, the other thing is that, I mentioned earlier as well, Dave, before you came on, I mentioned yesterday too. It was like Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, and Dak Prescott were literally just yanking the Eagles wherever they wanted. Like, as soon as they came up in the box, they ran play action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean, we all heard on TV, Dak literally said Bob Ross, and they ran a draw play. Mm-hmm. I mean, if that's not a Captain Obvious situation, I don't know what is. It was almost like they knew what they were going to do on defense before the Eagles knew, and they just completely just manipulated them all night long.
Yeah, and as you and I have often said, games are won and lost in the trenches, and the Cowboys dominated up front on both sides of the ball. Their offensive line, with the exception of Devon Hargrave for the Eagles, their Eagles defensive line just manhandled. And Hurts was under pressure all night long. I did think Andre Dillard played pretty well, considering just thrown in there. I thought I think he was one of like the few bright spots of the team. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, Hurts really didn't have a whole lot of time to do anything. Granted, he did not play well by any stretch of the imagination. But people that are calling for him to get benched for Gardner Minshew or what have you, that's just ridiculous.
Oh, it is ridiculous. And I've been trying to explain to people throughout the show, Dave. I understand there's a contingent of people who are frustrated after the loss. But to act like Hurts is a terrible quarterback, or you'd rather have Wentz back, or whatever the thing is out there. I mean, I've heard it all the last 24 hours at this point. Right. People act like quarterbacks are supposed to be finished products after 7 games. They forget that Peyton Manning led the league in interceptions his rookie year. Eli Manning looked like an abomination his first few games with the Giants, and he went on to win 2 Super Bowls, right? Like,
if you want to go back farther than that, I mean, Troy Aikman threw like 120 interceptions his first season or something like that. But yeah, you can't rush the judgment on a guy after a couple games. I mean, the same people that were, ready to anoint him as the savior of the franchise after the first game, those are the same people that want him benched now. He's not, he stinks. It's time to get rid of him. That's ridiculous. Give the kid a season to let him show what he can do, learn the system, get a little comfortable, and then you can make your judgment after that.
Yeah, Dave Weinberg, you've covered the Eagles since the mid-'90s. You understand all the quarterbacks who have come in and out of this franchise. I mean, this franchise has given everybody and their cousin ample opportunity to prove if they're legitimate or not. I mean, I remember when A.J. Feely was winning games. And people were like, how could you trade A.J. Feely? Because they brought McNabb back in. Like, I mean, this organization has been through about 200 quarterbacks, it feels like. I just want to see Hurts get a fair shake. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can't judge him by what he's done so far because he just hasn't had enough. He doesn't have enough experience yet. He's going to make mistakes. All quarterbacks do. And, just give him time. Let him get comfortable with the system. Let him feel as though it's a little bit. And I think he'll be fine. I really do.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN at Dave Weinberg 19 on Twitter. Check out his extra point columns over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Dave, I mentioned how long you've covered the Eagles earlier, and I wanted to bring it up because Nick Sirianni said something today at the media that concerned me a little bit, and that is, and I understand that I can do about it, but it still concerns me, and that is he mentioned that him and Jeffrey Lurie talk all week long. And there's a part of me that wonders, was Sirianni hired because Lurie just wanted the new car in the shop? Like, did he just want his own version of Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur? Like, is Sirianni here because Lurie just wanted a new guy?
I think he's here because he's his puppet, despite what some people would say. He had no other interviews with any other teams. He just wanted somebody that was going to do whatever Lurie wanted him to do. And Doug Peterson obviously wasn't willing to do that. He wanted to hire his own staff. He wanted to have a little bit more say over personnel. And to be quite frank, he deserved that. He won them a Super Bowl. He deserves that kind of power. Dude, don't take Howie Roseman's job and that kind of thing. But why would you give that kind of responsibility to Chip Kelly, for crying out loud? And you can't give it to Doug Peterson. And Nick is just a I don't want to say puppet. That's probably not a fair term, but I do think that he's not going to rock the boat with either him or Howie Roseman. That was one of the reasons he was hired. I still can't understand why Deuce Staley doesn't have that job, but I guess that's a discussion for another time.
Well, we know why. It's because, Jeffrey Lurie always says, I want to be 5 years ahead of 5 years ahead, right? I want emotional intelligence. I want to have innovative offensive minds. He uses all these words because he thinks he's some, this super progressive owner when it comes to football.
Right. That's
true. And it's like, hey, yes, you hired Andy Reid and Doug Peterson. You also fired them. Like, he conveniently forgets that he fired 2 of the 4 greatest head coaches in Eagles franchise history. He didn't just hire them, he also fired them.
Right, that's true. I mean, to be fair, I think I think both sides needed a break after a while. I mean, they've been together for a long time. I think things had gotten stale a little bit. So it was time for a new coach, I think, to come in. And I think Andy would agree with that. But Doug, though, I'll never understand the reasoning behind that. I just don't get it. He deserved one more year. That was just ridiculous. Especially when you consider all the confusion and the controversies and stuff and everything that went on last season. I think you got rid of Carson Wentz. Let Doug take over, keep the job, and let's see what he could do with Jalen Hurts and the rest of the offense.
How long do you think Sirianni lasts? Like, if you had to put on a number, because some people are messing into the show asking, they're legitimately asking, like, does Sirianni last more than 1 year? Is this a one and done? I mean, because Laurie, before Chip and Doug came along, he was extremely patient with Andy Reid, but Ray Rhodes is only here for a few years. Chip Kelly was here for a few years. What is Sirianni's shelf life?
Yeah, Chip Kelly was the shortest at 3 years. Ray Rhodes had 4, I believe. Doug had 5. Andy had forever. He's traditionally given coaches a chance. I think it all depends on how the rest of this season plays out. If he can show some progress, if the Eagles can make some strides, not necessarily wins and losses, but just show that they're a little bit, further along, then I think he'll stick with them. However, I wouldn't be surprised if you find out too many more games that happened Monday night. That was totally 100% on the coaching staff. And, if you get more games like that, then I don't know that he lasts more than one season.
Dave, it's a rough week for Philadelphia sports. You have the Eagles. The Eagles get embarrassed on Monday Night Football. The Phillies are just pathetic at this point. They scored barely one run against the Braves last night. So which of those two teams is in more of a pitiful spot right now?
Which teams?
The Phillies and the Eagles.
Eagles. I don't know if the Phillies were expected to contend. And they kept things interesting into the last week of the season. That's really all you can ask from a baseball team. I mean, they weren't some juggernaut that was just going to roll over anybody. They struggled during the season like all teams do. They regained their footing and had a tremendous, exciting August and September, which was really, baseball exciting again. The fact that they came up short, that really didn't. I mean, it's disappointing, but it's not really like earth-shattering. I mean, I think they still have a bright future ahead of them. The Eagles, though, I don't know, Josh. And this is a football town, 100%. Everybody lives and dies with the Eagles, and I'm sure people are very disappointed what happened on Monday night. And they just want a reason to be excited. They want some success. They want some progress, and that hasn't been shown.
Well, it doesn't get any easier because they have the Chiefs this Sunday.
Yep.
2 weeks from now, they have
1-6. Yep, I know.
Right.
Yep.
They have Tom Brady in 2 weeks. I mean, to me, the only chances they have over the next several weeks to win is they maybe have a small chance in Carolina,
right?
Because Carolina hasn't been world beaters, but they're still a very good team.
What's their record?
Well, they're undefeated, but also right. But I mean, you look back at some of their games, that's more their defense than their offense to me. And
there's absolutely no reason that won't continue against the Eagles too.
True.
But, you never know. That's true. You
never know. I mean, listen, you can win a game 9-6. A win's a win. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yep.
I feel like the Eagles could make it ugly with the Panthers. That could be a very ugly game.
Right.
And then
they could win that one. Yep, that's true.
And then the other game is Detroit, because I think Detroit's just a miserable team right now. They're completely dysfunctional. I mean, Dan Campbell's more concerned about biting kneecaps than he is about winning games.
Yeah.
So to me, those are the two most recent wins, because I don't think they're beating the Chiefs. I don't think they're beating Tampa Tom coming to Philadelphia. And right. I think they're going to get the Vegas version of the Miami flu out in Vegas when they go to the Raiders, because this is such a young team with a young coaching staff. To me, I think they're going to lose to the Raiders. So to me, the only chances they have over the next few weeks to win are the Panthers and the Lions.
I felt so bad for the Lions just last week. Justin Tucker hitting that 66-yarder, hits the crossbar, bounces over, and they lose to the Ravens. But that shows if they can stick with the Ravens to that point, then they certainly can beat the Eagles.
Well, listen, they put up 33 on the 49ers, and they competed with the Packers for 3 quarters. The Lions aren't a bad team. I just think they're a weird situation. You know what I mean? Like,
That's true. They are.
They got a new quarterback. They got a head coach who's not even a coordinator historically, which is a very odd thing in the NFL. There's only a handful of those guys at this point. So
Andy
it's
Reid.
like, well, Andy Reid, John Harbaugh, but aside from those two guys, there's not a lot of coaches in the league who don't have some sort of coordinator experience.
True. Yeah. Yep.
So, and I think Campbell, despite the fact that he assembled an all-star coaching cast of guys like Deuce and Anthony Lynn and all these coaches, there's a part of me that wonders, is Campbell learning on the job as well?
True. But the difference between him and Nick Sirianni, they're both learning on the job, but Campbell has that experience in his coaching staff that you really want to see. And aside from Jeff Stoutland, there really isn't that. I mean, they got guys who were at their high school proms 5 years ago coaching that team, for goodness sake.
I'm glad you brought that up. I mentioned that earlier. Like, Sean McVay had Wade Phillips the first few years in Los Angeles. Like, Wade Phillips is double Sean McVay's age. You know what I mean? He brought in Greg Olson, who was 15 years older than him. He brought in John Fossil, the son of Jim Fossil. But even John had been in the league for almost 12 years before they hired him to be special teams coordinator. So, like, McVay realized I need guys around him. Sirianni's biggest hire was this supposed defensive prodigy in Gannon, and the quarterback coach, Brian Johnson. Like, the rest of the coaching staff is a bunch of young guys.
Yeah. I'm not. Lurie's tried to. It seemed like he tried to explain himself when he hired Sirianni that this was going to be rebuilding season. However, he made some. They made some off-season additions that made people think that, hey, maybe they can be competitive. And after winning their opener in Atlanta, turns out Atlanta's not too good. So you can't really take much from that win. But people are all on the bandwagon. But I just think this is a team that's just not ready yet, and they're not going to be ready until at least next season, maybe even beyond.
Dave Weinberg at Dave Weinberg 19 on Twitter. Check out Extra Point columns over at 97.3 ESPN.com. He usually joins us during game night, but he was kind enough to join us an hour earlier here on the Sports Bash as I'm filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, I'm glad you got some fresh air, got to enjoy the golf today, and we'll catch up next week.
Thanks, Geoff. I appreciate it. Take care.
Josh Hennick here on game night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Sports Bash being brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan is now open on the Black Horse Pike at Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot. Visit them online at mattblattnissan.com. We'll wrap up the show coming up on the other side. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill at Josh Hennig on Twitter on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. Final segment of the show. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Busy show today. Thanks to everybody who chimed in throughout the show. It was a lot of fun. All the messages that came in. One more to get to before we actually two more messages to get to. Because on 97.3 ESPN mobile app, priority DMs into the show. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. Randy from Ocean City chimes and says, great points, Josh, about Hurts. Hey, if Philly doesn't want him, I'll take him in Pittsburgh. Jalen will be fine. That's from Randy in Ocean City. Man, Pittsburgh is a mess right now. Ben is obviously at the end of his career. He is in the twilight for sure. And I don't think anybody who is a football fan is that confident that Dwayne Haskins or Mason Rudolph are going to go in there and succeed Ben at this point. It's a great point by Randy in Ocean City. Thanks for messaging into the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of CLC. We've had a ton of messages throughout the show over on the text board. Also, as we are live on YouTube and Twitter, got a message coming in from Mark. Says, don't forget the power of Howie. Look at what he did with Doug, and Doug won a Super Bowl. That's a problem. We mentioned it earlier. Howie didn't fire Doug. Jeffrey Lurie fired Doug. People want to blame Howie. I understand some of you guys hate Howie Roseman, and that's on you. But the reality is that Howie didn't fire Doug. Here's what happened, and it's been documented by multiple people who cover the team. This is not opinion. This is fact. Doug Peterson met with Jeffrey Lurie multiple times. After the second time that Doug and Jeff met, Lurie said that they couldn't come to an agreement moving forward, and they both decided to move part on. So basically, Lurie said without saying, I didn't like Doug's plans for the future, so I got rid of him. That wasn't Howie. That was the owner. I think that we sometimes blame Howie for things that maybe have nothing to do with him. Howie is being told to do certain things by the owner. He's hiring people like John Dorsey and Andrew Berry and all these different Dave Caldwell from the Jags, all these former executives around the league to tell him what they think he should do. And we give Howie credit for taking these guys' advice on certain things, but not on other things. There are reports out there that Derek Barnett and Donnell Pumphrey were Joe Douglas draft picks. Well, Douglas isn't here anymore, and Howie's still being blamed for them. So do we give Howie credit for listening to Douglas, or do we give Howie blame for taking Douglas's advice when he shouldn't have? I don't know what the answer to that is. By the way, one of my favorite messages today. So I talked earlier, I was responding to the people who keep saying the Falcons stink. So they're trying to delegitimize the Eagles win in week 1. Well, Jim chiming in on Twitter followed up to my comment earlier about the fact that, every NFL team has talent. And to say that a team stinks is just ridiculous. Jim follows up on Twitter and says, at Josh Hennig, further, every Atlanta Falcon was the best athlete in high school, playing football, basketball, and or baseball, and or track, and was the best football player in their state. They went on to play football for a powerhouse school and then was the best player on their team there. Yeah, we act like because the Falcons scored 6 points against the Eagles in week 1, that they're automatically garbage. We forget they scored 25 points against the Bucs, and that wasn't in garbage time. Go back and check the game log. You could do that, or go back and rewatch the game on that NFL Game Pass they're offering for a free trial, right? The Falcons scored all their points in the second and third quarter. It wasn't all in the fourth quarter. It wasn't like the Bucs got out to a 35-7 lead and then the Falcons scored all their points. No, it wasn't all in junk tank. And by the way, they beat the Giants. So if the Falcons stink, which makes the Eagles stink, what does that make the Giants? Under that philosophy, if we're going to use college football logic, so the Giants then have to be one of the worst teams of football, right? So it's the Giants, the Texans, and the Jags. If they're the three worst teams, then that automatically means that the Falcons are potentially better than 3 other teams, and since the Eagles are better than the Falcons, if we're using college football logic, then that means the Eagles are what, the 10th worst team in the league? Oh my goodness. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. All right. Thanks everybody for chiming in throughout the show. Thanks also to Mike McGarry, Jason Fitz, Geoff Mosher, Dave Weinberg for joining the show today. Thanks to Mike Gill for entrusting me with the show as he was off playing in the LPGA Pro-Am. Coming up next, Best of the Sports Bash. If you missed our conversation with Mosher, McGarry, or Fitz, catch it next right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Have a great night, everybody.